Good afternoon. Good morning. We have a new face on the show today. So as we said last week, Hugh is going to be off, and my good friend Andrew Dixon has kindly decided to join us today. And we are going to be talking about just a bit of a rehash. We've done a review on the film Discovering Bigfoot. We wanted to go back into the conspiracy theory world. We're going to rehash the politics conversation we had last week, and I'll go into a bit more detail on that as it pertains to the election fraud. And we've had people provide us evidence, which we're going to dig into. And before I go into the last piece, I'm going to introduce Andrew. So Andrew is let me just bring this up here. Let me just mute that there. So Andrew, he's grown up where I've grown up. I've known Andrew all my life. Well, I guess, Andrew, we got to know each other. We first really met when we were sort of in our early teens.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to remember exactly how it occurred. Well, we were in high school for sure. And for those of your audience who are over where you are, how does that map? High school here is what, like ages, I think I was 14 through 18 when I was in high school.
It's a worldwide audience in which we have no viewers right now, so it's not too much of an issue. Right. So I'll give everyone a bit of a background from you, because you've kindly provided me a bio. And Andrew's bringing a bit of legitimacy to the show because he's gooder educated than we are. So Andrew Dixon has a master's degree, all but doctorate in English literature from Temple University. Has taught at Temple University in Philadelphia and in the College of New Jersey Ewing, New Jersey since 2014, and Rowan University in Gloucester County, New Jersey. He's also taught courses in British Lit Survey courses. Was it Arthurian literature, yeah. Shakespeare, short fiction, and in the spring we'll be teaching a new class on the intersection of language and identity. So I'm actually interested. There's a good chance we'll be seeing Andrew back, and I'm really excited to have some of your more forensic abilities, your ability to dig into things a bit more forensically than we are. Andrew has also worked in the U.S. labor movement in the U.S. since 2012, so this may, with some of our viewers, strike a chord, which I'm excited to see. First as an organizer and eventually as a national representative with the American Federation of Teachers. He has helped on strikes, organizing campaigns, and contract campaigns in Philadelphia, Newark, Albuquerque, Chicago, Tallahassee, Washington, et cetera, et cetera. I feel like I'm at the end of that scene with Willy Wonka when he's reading off all of the things that Charlie had done incorrectly. Andrew's also run for and won elective office in his hometown of Warminster, PA, where he was the Democrat Party nominee in the PA State House of Representatives, which we did get a Democrat for the show. I am an independent, but I'm probably leaning Democrat. We wanted to make sure we went full left wing just to fulfill that criteria, and was elected to and has served on the local school board since 2017. So Andrew, you come fully accredited and qualified to speak to people about things.
Yes, thank you. And believe me, I do a lot of talking. So
that's exactly what we need you to do. So Andrew, you are here for. It's a shame Hugh's not here because we now have shiny new intros, and I thought I would do an intro to the first section. So here we go. This is the first. Pins and needles. And needles.
Well, let me say this before we get started, since this is bearded philosophy. It represents 3 full days of growth. My mother is Irish, 100%, and my father was Slavic. And so what that apparently means is that I get hair everywhere except where I want it, which would be like right here.
It looks like you got a good shadow going. I don't think it's a prerequisite. I was thinking about whether you needed a beard to be on the show. And I was reminded of ZZ Top, where ZZ Top are known for their beards, but they had the one character who just had a mustache.
That's true.
Character. I don't know if that's the right one band member. I don't know. Character isn't correct. So today we are going to be reviewing the film Discovering Bigfoot, and we've had a good reply from the audience when it comes to conspiracy theories. And just to give you an overview, the documentary is by a gentleman by the name of Todd Standing, who he's quite an advocate in the Bigfoot community, from what I can understand. And I think Andrew's done some research. I've done some research. He's a bit of a controversial character in some of those circles. So just to give an overview of the film, Todd Standing, who claims, which we'll probably come back to this, I'm just going to give a quick overview, Andrew, and maybe we go through some of the notable scenes from start to finish. But the film is based on Todd Standing, who initially represents himself as a skeptic, and he brings in two biologists, one of which who I think is fairly legit. The other one I think is a bit questionable, given some of the things he says throughout the documentary. But that's my view. We'll get your view in a second on that, Andrew. And the film breaks down into a few different sections. And the first section is him representing what is an example of an encounter with Sasquatch. And my view going into the film is I don't believe there is Bigfoot. So his encounter with Bigfoot. The second section is him taking biologists into the field to give them an encounter and experience. And these both biologists do have an interest in Bigfoot, but one of them specifically isn't necessarily committing to being a believer. He's very scientific in some of his approaches. And then the film continues along the same vein, where he's continuing to show evidence that he has found to biologists and getting their opinion. He then goes back to Jeff Meldrum, who's one of the main biologists, to get his take on some video that he's seen. And then he wraps up the film again back in the field, showing more of his, quote, evidence. Would you say that's an accurate summary of the film?
I think that's very accurate.
And what I find interesting with that is there wasn't a lot to the film, was my view. I think my first takeaway was the film was just a bunch of Todd Standing pointing at things, saying, "Hey, look at that. That's Bigfoot." And that was my first takeaway.
Yeah, I was very surprised. Based on, you told me to take a look at this thing, and my father was very much into conspiracy theories and cryptozoology and aliens from a skeptic's point of view, but he enjoyed looking at those kinds of things. And as a result, as a kid, I've seen a lot of those kinds of things, and just through the osmosis of living in that household. And I have a rhythm in my mind of how they're supposed to go. And what was odd, I think, and I guess what you're getting at, is that the star of this movie about Bigfoot was not Bigfoot, but Todd Standing.
He was. I think I saw more Todd Standing than I did the biologists, and I was more interested in what they had to say.
Right. And Todd Standing, I mean, ultimately, he's a Bigfoot hunter, quote unquote. But in some senses, he should be playing the moderator, if that's the term I can use, of a full story about how we're setting about proving that this thing exists. Instead of that, it's really largely, I mean, he frankly bullies, some of his professor people, which we'll talk about later. But he feels more like, he's obviously auditioning himself, in my mind, for a Discovery Channel show in the extreme wilderness doing extreme things, right? He has this forceful personality that he's constantly trying to communicate on camera, really at the expense of his own material.
And I think that's a really good point. That was one of the main takeaways I pulled away. One point that you brought up that I read, that he actually, following the making of the documentary, he had he was involved in another show, I think it was on Discovery, with a gentleman by the name of Les Stroud. Now, Les Stroud, I don't know if you've heard of him. He's done Survivor Man on Discovery Channel. So he would go out, and they would have, like, let's say, plane wreckage they'd find in the middle of the desert, and they drop him down as if he had just crashed there and he had to survive with the camera. So similar to what Bear Grylls is over here. And I like Les Stroud. And he did a show where Les Stroud's been in the woods and he's seen some funny things. I didn't watch it, but apparently Todd Standing has done some stuff with Les Stroud. And people in the Bigfoot community weren't happy because it gave him a bit of legitimacy. But your point that his documentary was at the expense of I guess, the outcome of what he was trying to prove was very much central on my viewpoint. Instead of, let's say, mapping out a case for Bigfoot, saying
right,
Exhibit A, and here's the evidence, and here's why I believe that's the case, and here's the method that we're going to be going to maybe try to build on this piece of evidence. He pretty much just walks around the whole film pointing at shit. Which may be a good point. I think what we'll do is we're going to jump into some of the clips, and what I want to do is jump into the first scene, because when I started watching it with my wife, the first thing we noticed was really the quality of the. It reminded me of, I think I mentioned this to you on message. It reminded me of like an 8th grade VHS tape that the religion teacher would chuck on to learn about, let's say, the Holy Communion. So I'm going to put on the screen here. Let me just pull up. And this is where I am sometimes terrible, Andrew. You're going to find that my production quality, that's why I got those intros and outros, to try to legitimize the whole thing. So I need to go.
Don't worry about it. I think about this all the time, that I have a, the classic face for radio, but I have the voice for silent movies. So where does that leave me?
So let's see here. I'm going to try to see if can you see and hear that?
I can't hear anything, but I can see that is indeed the credit sequence.
Let me try again. Make sure you can hear that.
All right.
So we're going to do share audio, application window. So this I'll be sharing is just an example of what I was introduced to. Can you hear that?
No.
Let me check the volume here. So you can't hear anything in that?
No. I don't know if that necessarily means anything.
So the opening credits are very, which in a way I wondered if this would add some legitimacy to it, because it was somebody who was really passionate about. That bothers me in itself. He didn't centrally align the Discovering Bigfoot logo. Just a bit of a bugbear for me. It's a bit sort of
but he did,
adjusted.
He obviously did use whatever this little light streak is, or is that a translucent piece of grass?
He used some shadow. Yeah.
He lined it up against the edge of that. That looks okay to me. If it went over that, it wouldn't look right.
What I struggle with is here. It's the fact that he's not centered the Bigfoot under Discovering. He's kind of, I don't know. It just looks sort of chucked on there. But production quality not very high. So there was a hope that, for me, that this is somebody who's passionate about the subject, not necessarily a filmmaker, somebody who believes in Bigfoot and who was going to be really sharing his stories and his evidence. And the first thing he talks about this experience where he went into the woods, and I think it was at about 6:35. He starts to talk about, I'm just going to let this play. Let me know if you can hear this. If not, it's not a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear anything?
No. Is this an issue with media blocking?
It might be, yeah. So Prime has slightly changed its settings, so I can't share as easily, which isn't a big deal. We don't need to hear it necessarily. We can replay it. I'm just going to try one more time. So these are normal technical issues that we seem to have. Share screen. Let's try it this way. Share audio. Share audio. Let me try it this way. Let's see if this works. Can you hear that?
Yeah, and I apologize for the feedback.
Is that on your? Oh, can you mute your devices?
I don't know why it's doing that, but I will.
So I think your laptop has got audio coming out of it, and then that's feeding back into your mic.
It does. Thank you.
There we go. Perfect. Okay.
I have something queued up for ourselves for later.
I'm looking forward to that.
Have you checked if, I mean, this is since we're on the air and live adjusting, have you checked to see if this thing is on YouTube? Because YouTube
it is.
have any. What?
It is live.
No, not. I'm not asking the show. I'm asking about the documentary. What is it's?
So we can play clips. We can play short clips. We can't play the whole thing through.
Oh, I understand.
YouTube,
I understand, but you could get the same clip on YouTube, perhaps, is what I was thinking.
I think we've sorted it, though.
Oh, okay,
no, I think
good.
we've sorted it now. No, but you can't. You have to. This was the only place I could. This is one of the few documentaries I could find that I wanted to review that seemed to have more downloads than any other, which is why I wanted to check it out. So, what we were introduced to in the first scene is Todd Standing going back to the scene of some work he had done, I guess, 5 or 6 months beforehand. And the first thing he's talking about is he's in this alcove, and the first scene for me is I lose quite a bit of buy-in to Todd Standing right out of the gate. And there's a few questions I have, and I think you had a few questions in this first reenactment of his standard Bigfoot sightings. And the first one is this for me.
Now this is where it all started. I was sleeping here, and they were up what is about 10 yards above me.
So I've done some, not survival training. I'm not an outdoors person, but I've done a lot of, I've taken kids camping. I've done some basic survival stuff. And when he was out there, he said there was 2 feet of maybe 3 feet of snow on the ground. And he said it was minus 20 degrees. So he's from Canada. I believe maybe that's minus 20 Celsius. He's sleeping in 2 feet of snow in the middle of brush. So if you're sleeping in minus 20 and 2 feet of snow, what you're going to do is you're going to dig sort of like, I forget what they call them, like a bivvy or an igloo or something. You're going to dig down into the snow, and you're going to try to shield yourself from the temperatures. He's in the middle of brush. So he's trying to, give the impression that he was just sleeping in the sticks. And right away, I'm questioning as to whether he's already telling the truth. So I already have some buy-in issues at this stage. Now, the next thing that catches me is, I'm just going to move it ahead just a little bit more, is he then starts talking about seeing these Bigfoot creatures.
I knew that this direction was back to that gorge, so this is where I started to follow. And the track started over here, and I just followed them all the way in. It's minus 15. There's about 3 feet of snow, and I just had a confrontation with 3 different Sasquatch. One of the Sasquatch of which has taken off into an area that I'm following right now. I'm following this trackway. I'm dog tracking it, as I call it. I'm about 15 yards away from it. You never follow the track of a wild animal, especially when it's this fresh.
So he spent no
time.
Something?
Can I say something here? Because what we learned, I've already learned something in this documentary. You can criticize it all you want, but I've already learned that the plural of Sasquatch is in fact Sasquatch.
That is something I didn't know. So
yeah,
it's not, did he say Sasquatch?
You don't add an S. It's like the plural of deer is deer, right? He says one of said Sasquatch, or one of the Sasquatch went this way, right? So plural. Anyway,
so it's not Sasquatch, or it's definitely not Sasquatches. That doesn't sound.
No, that would be
Sasquatch. Sasquatch was a moose. You would think.
Yeah,
Sasquatch.
Yeah, that's where I would have gone with it, but okay.
But he's and you, I think you sent me, because you sent me a message with a few notable points, and there was one thing he talked about, and I don't want to keep playing clips, but he claims in the film, and it's at this point here.
Yeah.
Let me just see if I can clear that. Oh no, way to go me.
Of miles from the nearest human being.
So he's claiming this here in a second is a Sasquatch standing there. So his storyline, correct me if I'm wrong on this. He is standing, he's now standing here. He's 15 yards, which is nothing from what's an 8+ foot tall Sasquatch. And it's standing right there. And the other 2 are up on the hill, and it's frozen, and it doesn't think he can, he can see this Sasquatch. I think it's a tree.
I think so too. I think it's part of that tree.
To back it up, he then tries to show, and I'll play, that he's trying to represent it. So he's put the camera down. The camera is now probably 6 feet below his feet, and he's put it down in the snow, it looks like.
I'm standing there in the trackway, and when I jump or put my arms in the air, my hands straight up in the air are about 8'6", which are still not reaching the height of the Sasquatch that had just been previously standing there.
So he's using that camera angle to represent that this back here, let me find it, is the same as this right here.
Yeah, the camera angle clearly changed.
So I'm just, for me, it's right away. This is what he's representing as his evidence. As his, this is so good that I need to share this with everybody. You know, this is the thing I'm like, if you look at comedians or musicians, they always lead with their best and finish with their best, don't they?
Yeah, they sure do. In fact, you know, I have a note on this, and if you wouldn't mind switching, my laptop, I believe, is on air. I'm going to play
I will.
A very short clip from a mini series that I believe produced in England, but regardless, or by English producers, called "The Men Who Killed Kennedy." It's from the mid '80s.
So hold on, Andrew. Before you do, you need to hit pause for a second because I think you need to share your screen. So I think one of the things you need to do. Oh wait, yeah. Let me just see here.
If I mute my mic on the laptop, or excuse me, on my iPad, which is what I'm on, and then unmute the mic on the laptop so people can hear the documentary, will that work?
Yeah, I think you need to share your screen though, because right now we only have, just so you can see on the screen, this is your icon or what would be your camera that's turned off.
I see.
So if you can share your screen.
Yeah, one second. I got you.
So once your mic's off, we'll have to play it and then stop it, and then as soon as you stop, I will put you back on.
All right. Now.
So right now, I think you've got your camera on.
Oh, right. You are correct. Share screen. See, I'm sorry, technologically challenged.
No, this is the first time you're using this medium.
Share screen. Select window or screen. Oops. Yes.
You're fitting in perfectly. This is exactly what I do on the show every week.
Can you see where did it go?
So I'll put your left. Once you share screen, I should see here. Right now, I'm not seeing your screen.
Well, okay. So I have it says, "Will you allow StreamYard.com to share your screen?"
So you would want to say
allow. Okay, here we go.
Well, I think we've got it. Yep, we've got it here.
All right, now I'm going to mute my mic for a moment. This is from a documentary called "The Men Who Killed Kennedy," and just to introduce it for a minute for context, I remember seeing this when I was a little kid. My parents watched it. I think it aired on PBS here in the States, and so I have vague memories of it. And so one time when I was an adult, I was like, what was that documentary? I remember being really mysterious and fascinating. I tried to find it on the internet, now 30 years later or whatever it was. And sure enough, I found it. And I got to, this is fairly early. This is about an hour into the whole thing on YouTube edited together. It's a 7-hour set of things. This is about an hour in. And I remember having the biggest laugh out loud moment. These two fellows are studying a photograph of the so-called grassy knoll. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Kennedy assassination, basically his limo is driving down the road. The idea is that Lee Harvey Oswald is in that book depository above, if you believe the official account, and he's shooting down from the building at Kennedy. But people who are into conspiracy theories have long argued that there was somebody standing in the quote-unquote grassy knoll, which is off to the side, but at least on a physical level, closer to where the limo was when Kennedy was shot. So although it's moving across, the limo would have been moving across the field of vision of somebody. In fact, it's where the photographs were taken. The famous film, the Zapruder film, was taken from the grassy knoll. So the idea is that somebody was not far from where Abraham Zapruder was taking that movie, but maybe slightly up the hill in the bushes. And they have a photograph of that area, and this is what happens. So I'm going to mute the mic.
Oh, hey, Andrew. Have you oh, never mind.
What?
I was wondering if you shared the audio. Did you tick the share audio button?
Oh, thank you.
So now go back to let me move the screen off of here for a second. So when you go back into it, unshare your screen. You might need to reshare it, but there's a tick box at the bottom when you share it that says share audio as well. So you're sharing screen, but there's a separate thing down below that before you share your screen that says share audio.
StreamYard. No, I don't see that. It just says allow share Firefox with only sites you trust. Well, you know what? You don't even need the. I mean, the audio makes it slightly funnier, but
well, let's pop it on then. Go ahead and share it. And if we don't hear, that's not a problem.
Yeah. I will allow, and I'll back. You get the idea that they are. I guess I can narrate it.
Yeah, if you have it muted, you can narrate it. Yeah.
Oh yeah. You get the idea that they're trying to show kind of like what Todd Standing was trying to show, that there must be somebody in this photograph. It's this image of this area, and so they get him to stand there and take a measurement, and yada yada yada. They're going to go back to the photograph in a minute of that's the same spot, and here we go.
So they're claiming that smudge
there's somebody
is a person.
there. Oh yeah, watch this. And I'm going to tell you later in the documentary, it's even funnier is they go back to that photograph and they do that same thing again, only they show like 7 people in the photograph. They're like, it's like a whole forest of people.
I love it. That reminds me of like every ghost hunting show where they like claim to see like like something in a silhouette and I can't see it. And then the TV show is very nice, kindly silhouettes it for you so they can show you what they're suggesting.
Yeah. I like also he's wearing like a Sherlock Holmes hat, I think, in this one. Anyway. It's really like it's unintentional comedy at its best, but that's exactly what I was watching. That's what I'm looking at. I'm like, oh, like this is actually frankly clearer. Like if you wanted to use your imagination, but what I noticed,
I can see what he's saying. Yeah, he's saying this right here on the like you're not seeing my pointer. The bit to the left of the tree. I think he's looked at this photo and said, "Oh, that looks like I can, portray that as a shoulder." Because I'm not buying that this is anything. And whether he believes,
I will say this though, like keep in mind, I think we've already said, and I'll probably talk about later, but we've already said this guy's not above essentially faking what he needs to fake. So there even could be something there. You know what I mean? Like he and a partner could have established this shot. Although if I were doing that, why be so circumspect? You know what I mean? Why make it this weird shadowy image that you have to interpret? But that certainly could have been done. But when I look at it, I see like as you get closer up as you move up the tree. I don't have a pointer because I'm on my iPad, but you see that there's like a faded piece. Yeah, you have your pointer.
Yeah, it's not showing up on here.
Yeah, well, whatever. I see what looks to me like the same shade is producing, images of the front of the tree that you can barely see. Sort of the light that is reflecting off the part that's facing him. So what's behind it is sort of in shadow. That's kind of what I'm looking at. But yeah,
because what he ends up doing is he ends up cutting away from that. And I felt when he went to sort of the next scene, where the next scene is him, going back to more of a illustrative thing on how many Sasquatch there are, and I'll share this image as well that he's put on the screen. How many he believes there are. I felt a bit shortchanged in a way. I don't remove no. I had that. I felt a bit shortchanged in a way because he had all of this evidence of like footprints. They were walking all around him. There was 3 feet of snow. He was the only person there. Maybe he could have gotten some sort of evidence as in the footfall where there might be some hair or something. And he just sort of left it at the best. We forgot to share one thing, though. We forgot to share one major.
Can you leave it on that for a second? Because this is always my issue with all Sasquatch things, right? So admittedly, this is an extremely wide area, and it's 15,000 Sasquatch. But at the same time, think about this for a second. They've got no problem digging up dinosaur bones from creatures that last walked the earth 65 million years ago, but nobody can come up with any.
No.
So,
I've actually heard, and I've heard somebody explain that, though. And I started to pay attention to Bigfoot. There's this really silly show on Animal Planet, of all places, called Finding Bigfoot. Yeah. And they have one proper skeptic and three others who are very much, going through a process of confirmation bias week on week. And as part of that process, they have an explanation for everything. And a lot of Bigfoot believers, and if anybody who believes in Bigfoot, wants to, comment, please do. I think they believe they're a lot like elephants where they go somewhere to die. So therefore, all of the bones are going to be in a cave. And they'll also say that they're very much, or they may bury their dead because they're very human-like. They're sort of that missing link between gorilla and man, and have that level of intelligence, which Todd Standing does explain throughout. I guess his thing is humans have evolved with technology and Sasquatch have evolved with nature. Yes, so Sasquatch are amazing at the nature shit and we're good at computers. And I thought,
I have a note on that. He has this notion that on the one hand, I'm trying to remember where I wrote it down, but the idea is there it is. These things are supposed to be, he keeps talking about how they're developed to their environment, that they have evolved to live in the northern Canadian and United States backcountry to the same level that we have evolved to build skyscrapers in Manhattan, right?
Yes,
so they are perfectly suited to that. But they also fall for the old bag of apples trick. Every time he puts them out.
Spoiler alert. We'll get to the bag of apples next because I have a few thoughts on that. But this was the first scene where I thought this thing is a bit of a joke now, because he was spotting the Sasquatch right there in that little crook of the tree, and then something quite dramatic happened. So I'll let it play out. I've got it muted. So he's walking. And if you look over the left side of the screen, to anybody who hasn't seen this, he then claims he hears them and they threw an 80-pound log at him. So I don't know how he knows it's 80 pounds, but a log was thrown at him from a Sasquatch. Now, the issue I have isn't so much with, let's assume I'm going to throw out all of my biases here, that there are no Sasquatch. He's already setting the stage for a precedent on what he expects to be able to prove. So if he's having these interactive confrontations with Sasquatch regularly, one, it's going to, quote, and you're going to go into this, beg the question, why aren't more people seeing it if the Sasquatches are interacting with him to the degree that they are, throwing 80-pound logs at him?
Yeah,
but also the fact that he's qualifying it as an 80-pound log that he casually lifts and moves off of his shoulder. And just the way it was thrown at him, it almost looked like there was like somebody over his shoulder, and it looked so staged. And I just was right away. My wife looked at it.
Thrown with no force, no distance. Somebody was right there to drop that log in the frame of his camera, and without him shaking his camera, you're dropping it. I mean, if I were standing 10 yards away from you and chucked an 80-pound log through the air and struck you in the side, you don't think that you would drop the camera or at least fall over?
It's a good point, because if you watch this, it doesn't look like it's come from up high. It literally looks like it's come from just behind him, like somebody was 3 feet behind him. It doesn't come from very high. It's just like right almost below his shoulder line is where it's coming from.
I mean, look at the physics of it. It just drops. Like you see at the top of the frame, and then it just drops. Now you could say, well, it hits him in the side of the shoulder. But again, if it hit him in the side of the shoulder hard enough to be shot from the distance that he's taught, to have been thrown from the distance he says, even 10 yards, it would have had, or 5 yards. I mean, 15 feet. Think about what it would take to throw an 80-pound log 15 feet. You have to throw it hard enough.
It would have to be pretty high up. It would be coming from above.
Yeah, and it would be coming at a sufficient speed to knock him over. Why would an 8'6", 800 to 900-pound creature that he keeps talking about, with two more, by the way, because that's the one off to the side. He's got one in the front, one off to the side. He's about a third one. Why would this 8'6", 800 to 900-pound creature need to ineffectively toss a log at this guy to get his attention when he's got them surrounded? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
I'm just Googling something, because the other question is, for an apex predator to default to throwing rocks and trees, if it was that big and that strong and that much of an apex predator, surely it would just come and pick him up and throw him around like a rag doll. It wouldn't just stand at a distance and throw big branches. Researchers in Cameroon have seen gorillas use tools. So this is just on a random nature.com Google search. Researchers in Cameroon have seen gorillas use tools aggressively, and they're targeting humans, according to the Daily Telegraph. The apes were observed throwing clumps of grass, earth, and in one case, a stick at humans. So confirms, that must be a Sasquatch.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
throwing earth at someone, throwing earth at someone throwing stones doesn't sound like a hugely clever. I'm just going to leave that. I don't know what that's about.
Yeah, well,
Ignore that.
Well, it's not huge. Again, I think I know where the guy's going. This is not just an apex predator, but somebody who's, he claims is evolved as we have evolved on a parallel track to work perfectly in this environment. And their big solution to someone invading it is to
throw a stick. Which, I don't know. They must be. If they're not hunting elk by throwing branches at them, they're grabbing them and breaking their necks. So why would they? It's a human. Let's not go near them. They look quite dangerous. Let's throw a stick. That's probably the way forward. So,
this is a minor quibble. I mean, okay, maybe the Bigfoot was just playing around with them. Okay, I could even throw that one aside. Like, this is 3 big feet who are, bemused by this weirdo with a camera talking all the time, and they're just having some fun in the same way that 3 dudes who've had a few on a Friday night might have some fun with somebody who struck them as being pompous or in some other way annoying. And so they could, this is not evidence that they don't exist, but it is, like, to me, amusing that this is what I find amusing, I guess. It's when you realize, when you start to reframe this thing doesn't exist. So anything that you're thinking about it has to be invented. So this is Todd Standing's projection of how he thinks these things would behave if they actually existed.
Yeah. And he's had enough experiences with them where he then goes on after this experience, and that was the evidence he gave. That was it. It was the stick, and it was the figure, and it was him standing there jumping in the area just to show how tall it was. Right. The next scene is him talking about, we saw, and by the way, we lost your camera. There we go.
Oh, I just blew my nose, and I didn't want to,
Oh, bless you. That's good quality production right there. You've upped the game.
That's why
already for the show.
There you go.
So the next scene is him talking about the 80% of, like, 15,000 Sasquatch in range of some of the biggest cities in Canada and North America, without being seen by a single person or any clear video evidence or interactions outside of what he's had. But he then says that, I've taken scientists into the field with me before, and 80% of the time, I think he said, we have real life encounters with Sasquatch. However, I get my best results on my own. So the next scene is him showing another documented encounter with a Sasquatch. And this was an intriguing encounter to me, because I'm going to play just not a scene, but I'm going to show an image here, which for me, again, I'm starting to question, where are we at here? So he's got clearly has a night vision camera. He's showing a night vision camera, and he's walking around whilst he's being surrounded by Sasquatch. Now, this is the only time we see the night vision camera employed. not when he's looking at them apparently 10 yards away. He also has set up apples. Now, one of his favorite ploys is to set up apples to try to pull them in. Now, he's got the money for a night vision camera, but he has yet to employ a $20 trail cam that takes pictures based on movement. So he's never at any point in this situation decided, you know what, if I put a trail cam by the apples that they always grab, I'm going to make millions because I've discovered Sasquatch. And I think it was, where was it?
But you see, Sean, these things are evolved enough that if he put the trail cam next to the apples, they would see it and know it was trap, and they wouldn't take his gift of the apples.
But they haven't evolved with technology. I don't see why.
Yeah, but remember, they're the most clever beasts who fall for the old apple trick.
You could every time. So he's talking about how he thinks he's pissed them off, but he's left apples for them. So for some reason he's pissed them off, but he's left apples for him. Throughout the whole encounter with these Bigfoots, he's whistling. So you hear him go.
Yeah, why is he whistling? I keep writing that note. Like, what is that? What is that? He never explains what he thinks that's supposed to accomplish.
And he's where was it? There was one thing. I want to actually play the Sasquatch calls here. So I'm going to play this scene here. Let me get the volume up. So he's being. All right, did you hear that?
I did.
Okay, I'm going to play that call again. Let me find it. There we go. So listen carefully.
Hey there, big guy. Apples. It's Todd. Okay, like I said. Wow.
Did you hear that?
One here.
The little growling noise.
Okay, so I want you to keep that in your mind. I've got something else that I can show you. Because there's another situation where we hear noises. And I found this, and I thought...
The note I took on this whole scene is that's the sound of the bear that's going to eat you, pal. Like, that's what I...
Well, we're gonna change this up here. I'm gonna remove this. I'm gonna add a new screen, and I'm gonna have to come back to that one though.
Joke's on you, Todd Standing. They ain't interested in your apples.
They don't. Apex Predators.
That's a documentary that's a documentary worth watching right there.
So this is what I found. Listen to this.
Yeah.
So this is what I found. So he's in grizzly bear country right now.
Yeah, and I'm talking about.
That sounded almost exactly like what we're hearing.
Yeah, I'm telling you, if I were Todd Standing, I would have run for the goddamn hills, but not because of the Bigfoot. So you and I talked about this in the pre-show notes, but I even made the note for those of you who saw that and you remembered the title even that Warner Herzog documentary about the grizzly bears.
Grizzly Man, was it?
Yeah, I think so. That's right. He and his girlfriend go to live with the grizzly bears, and he thinks he's friends with them. And unfortunately, the tragic ending of that story is that the grizzly bears that he thinks he's friends with eat him and his fiance or wife or whatever. You know, and he lives incredibly long. This is where we got into that. I guess I'll hold it for later, but this is where I started getting into the question of: is this guy even buying his own BS? Because if you were a legitimate outdoorsman who is legitimately skeptically, as he calls himself at the beginning of this, the skeptic, investigating whether or not Bigfoot exists, it would be obvious to me that spending time out in the woods, putting out apples, trying to draw the attention of a big animal could lead to a kind of encounter, not with an imaginary animal, but with an animal that's very real and very dangerous. And he doesn't seem concerned about that at all. So it makes me wonder.
A theory about. Oh, sorry, Andrew.
Well, it just makes me wonder about whether or not, you know, if he's doing all these things he's saying he's doing, staying out by himself night after night in the woods, in the snow, at night, you know, for weeks on end, trying to track this animal that, you know, is fanciful, you know, or unproven to exist in an area where you have, like legitimate threats to your life and safety. It just makes me wonder about, you know, if he's really doing that, I would expect to see a different pattern of behavior than I'm seeing in this video. Go ahead.
So this scene, I was questioning, and there's another scene in the distant future. I have a slightly different take, but it does have a grizzly bear spin on it. And this, I started to wonder if he's crazy enough to actually believe that there's Sasquatch out there and they're actually grizzly bears, or if he's got a very similar view to grizzly bears as Grizzly Man or whomever from the Werner Herzog documentary, and is using his interactions with grizzly bears to represent Sasquatch. Because I do hear something on there, whether that's added in post-production, I don't know. It sounds exactly like a grizzly bear, exactly like a grizzly bear.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me if if he's putting out apples and, I mean, anybody who
they're hungry
knows here knows that you better put a lid on your trash can that's sealed, because if you don't, when you wake up in the morning, a bear will have knocked it over and gone through the whole thing. I mean, those are not as dangerous. Those are bears that'll run if they see a person as opposed to, eat you. But, bears have a good nose for food, and they will come and get it if you put it out.
So the next scene, so the 2558, we actually see, and to me, this looks like a joke a bit, but on his night vision camera, which is placed what looks to be a good 20 yards away from the apples. So he's made sure that the night vision camera, the one camera that would get the most detail of anything in the middle of the woods, is as far away as possible. And in this scene, you can see the apple, actually something taking the apple. So it happens at about 25:58, so about 8 seconds. If you look in this area, you see that hand there?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
It's for what I don't understand is, again, for an apex predator like the Sasquatch, why do they have to be so sneaky to take his apples? Is it a bit of a moral thing where they feel kind of bad about taking things? They don't have jobs, no money, so it looks like they actually have somebody with a black glove.
Yeah,
it just looks so fake. It's so funny. One more time. It just makes me laugh just to see how it picks it up too, because it's just almost like I don't want to get caught. I'm just gonna pull it away casually. Where are we at? 25:40. So in about 10 seconds, 10 to 15 seconds. So there's the 3 apples.
Right.
And he's looking at
there it goes.
It's almost like they have Triumph, the insult dog comic, that Conan O'Brien thing. It looks like somebody has a Triumph, it's Triumph, the insult dog taking the apple from. So this is, and what's making me question this is throughout this whole process, he's showing these videos of Sasquatch, like facial views of Sasquatch. And that's really compelling evidence, if real. And he's showing these sneaky, sort of fake looking apple stealing mishaps surrounded by grizzly bear sounds as his sort of the case he's making.
Yeah. No, it's
so
go ahead.
No, go ahead. You were going to say?
Oh, well, I was, this whole first 50 minutes of this documentary is silly. And, I was thinking, just to go back for a minute, and I apologize, I should have thought of this right off the bat, but, the answer to that question, that you were saying, well, like, I have an answer for, like, how come 15,000 of these living creatures walking around and you can't ever come up with evidence, but you can find evidence of dinosaurs and all kinds of other woolly mammoths, and they say, well, elephants, they go to caves to die, but we know that there are elephants. We don't need to find their but that's like a complete non sequitur. Yeah, like I can go find an elephant anytime I want because it's this giant creature, who walks around. Like the idea that there's a 7 or 8 foot, 800-pound creature that exists totally in secret, but in numbers. When you go out on the internet, there was a group of scientists who were supposedly, find definite evidence that it existed. I was doing some research. And they were American people. And I think they were from Tennessee. And they were saying that there were big feet running around as far down as Texas. So now all of a sudden the habitat of this creature. And if you know anything about Texas, it's big, it's flat, and there's no trees.
Not a lot of hiding spaces.
What? It's all
there is so what I think a lot of Bigfoot sightings turn out to be. And there's video of, let me see if I can find a video of this. I've seen this, and to me, this is what, because bears, black bears, grizzly bears, they're quite agile, and they're used to getting things high up in trees. Sure. And I saw this bear walking bipedal. I saw a video of a bear walking bipedal. Let me share this here.
I mean, you train bears for circuses to do.
Hold on a second. Sorry?
They used to train bears to do that in circuses. You know, walking around on their hind feet, bouncing the ball on their nose. That's real.
So let me find just so anybody who hasn't seen, who maybe has been good enough to stick around this long. I'm not going to share the audio. It looks like it's been shared on national TV. Let me just move to it here. So this is what a
Oh wow, that bear walking around. Yeah, I mean, I have to admit that if I saw that from a distance, I would be, wow. Okay, that's really good.
But to me, you could, if you've never seen, and I didn't know that bears did this, so I wouldn't assume Bigfoot, but you can understand, especially in areas where you see Bigfoot statues, and I think some of so to a certain degree, Jeff Meldrum, there's a point. Actually, I'm not going to step on my toes here. But you get to the point where even if you don't believe it, you get so saturated with these thoughts and everybody's seeing this and everyone's experiencing this. And then when you see, whatever this is walking around, if you're just turning your head really quick, you're like, it's a baby Bigfoot. Or it looks more like a person in a suit than it does like that. I could see why somebody would say that's a Bigfoot.
Right. Absolutely. No. Although I will say the previous image kind of relies for your fogginess on the fact that the image was grainy, and like your vision would be much better than that image was. But having said that, I agree. Like if you caught a quick glimpse of something walking through the woods on its hind legs like that, oh my God, yeah. I mean, like you'd certainly be questioning, like, what did I just see? Because now I don't, but I had not seen a bear doing exactly that. Oh yes, the buildings.
So this and I think when we look at the Bigfoot documentary, it sort of gets to the point where I think so this scene is him talking about evidence. Now, in my view, watching this in hindsight, I think a lot of this stuff has been staged because it's almost like a tour where he's taking scientists to areas where things have happened and he's pointing out things such as footprints on the ground. And I know from doing some reading that trackers don't really track footprints. That's like the last thing they look for. They're more interested in disturbances like twigs breaking, which ironically is a big thing that he does look for. But he spends a lot of time looking at tracks around these things. But when I was listening to this, it sounds like a sales pitch more than a discovery session. He's trying to really get scientists on board with this point of view. Oh, hold on. I'm not sharing the audio. Oh, yes, I am. So here he's starting to, I just want to make sure I have the timestamp right. Sorry. So the timestamp for this is 42:44. So yeah, it's coming up. So this scene, at this point, to me, it sounds like he's selling. He's not discovering.
Take a picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was rooted as well.
Agreed.
So, the only thing I'm concerned about is
They're not all rooted though. You haven't seen them all yet.
Around?
Yeah,
that one isn't.
Let's go have a look at that one.
So that was interesting to me because I replayed that a few times. They had just stumbled upon this. He had made the comment that it wasn't rooted, or it was rooted, and he knew, Todd Standing, already. Oh, you haven't looked at the other ones that I've probably set up. They're not rooted, right. So therefore that's not what you're saying it is. And the way he said it, it sounds like, oh no, you didn't see it the way that I set it up. I'm going to play that again.
Most impressive I've ever seen. Gotta take a picture.
Yeah, that was rooted as well.
Agreed.
So, the only thing I'm concerned about is
they're not all rooted though. You haven't seen them all yet.
Around?
Yeah,
that one isn't.
Let's go have a look at that one.
So let's go have a look at that one that I've discovered with you, and that one's not rooted yet. Now he may make the case.
Go ahead.
I was saying he may make the case that he's seen it already and he's been there and he hasn't disturbed it. So
that's,
to be fair, I
can
get
what he's going to say. And honestly, it certainly makes it suspicious that he found these things by himself and is now taking this guy on a guided tour of what he found, because he's basically therefore admitting was there by himself first, right?
Hmm.
You know what I mean? In doing that. So even in a legitimate quote unquote sense, there's a problem. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's clear to me. I mean, these things, they are, well, I could, there's part of me that says, it's just a natural sort of collapse that could happen anywhere. But at the same time, it does sort of have a look of having been arranged, but that doesn't prove anything other than Todd Standing is a mediocre filmmaker.
So there's a few other scenes I want to show before we wrap on this subject for this week, and one of which is at 56:30, where if you listen to the questions he's asking, they're very leading. Everything he asks the scientist, there's an expected end goal. So I would expect if I'm in the woods and I'm going through a discovery process with somebody who's taking me out to see this new species or try to find this new species, we're going to be looking at things inquisitively together. Instead, every time he asks questions, there's always a end goal he's trying to get to. So I work in my job entails messaging and sales and to a certain degree manipulation. And for me, this sounds very much like me trying to get a customer to an outcome that I want them to come to.
Of course.
Good question. Looks like they're moving exactly towards where the apples were.
I'm going to rewind that just a little bit. Sorry.
Yeah, I can't really.
No signs of any bear.
Tracks as if it had stood here and walked ahead.
In what direction are they moving?
In what direction are they moving?
Looks like they're moving exactly towards where the apples were.
Looks like they're moving towards the apple. So I'm trying to get you to believe that these things are moving to apples.
Well, I'm seeing in this one, I'm seeing the heel, and I'm seeing actual. See the toe marks in there? So I'm seeing a bit of toe marks. And a definitive heel mark.
This is not objective analysis. This is a prosecutor prosecuting the case. And that's
by the way, and I do it on the show. Did you hear a fart?
I did not.
There was a fart. I just picked that up. I'm going back. It might be Sasquatch too.
Oh yeah, it probably was.
Let me just keep your ears open. I heard that and I thought, Jesus. I caught that in post-production.
I needed proof, something profound, and then I found it.
So again, what do you think of this trackway that you're seeing?
Well, there's certainly some impressions in the moss here that could well be Sasquatch tracks. The pair here, and then 2-3 additional tracks as if it had stood here and walked ahead.
In what direction are they moving?
Good question.
Looks like they're moving exactly towards where the apples were.
Yeah, I can't really.
It's right around here.
Tell.
Well, I'm seeing in this one, I'm seeing a heel, and I'm seeing actual. See the toe marks in there? I'm seeing a bit of toe marks.
There it is.
A definitive heel mark.
Are you sure that wasn't a Bigfoot growl? Because it could have been a Bigfoot growl.
In there? I'm seeing a bit of toe marks.
That is a fart.
Heel mark.
I'm sorry. That is definitely a fart. One more time.
See the toe mark? I'm seeing a bit of toe marks.
Yeah.
And a definitive heel mark.
So Todd's standing not too good with post-production. I did hear that right, didn't I?
Oh, I hear it, right.
Last one, I promise.
I'm seeing actual. See the toe marks in there? I'm seeing a bit of toe marks. And a definitive.
Good catch. Good catch.
Oh, that's brilliant. So we know we've solved the mystery of what happens when 3 old guys go into the woods with their partner. There's no way the apex predator Sasquatch is going to be able to. They're not going to be able to sneak up on him. I don't think.
No.
Kidding aside, those questions leading up to that point, were very much. I've got a scene here, and I'm trying to get you to discover the scene in the way that I presented it, and that's how I read those questions.
I agree. Like I said, prosecutor prosecuting the case, not a objective scientific method assessment of evidence.
So,
hey, before you go too far into it, because I had I wanted to look at, as you'll recall, I think my biggest note here was on 5208.
Let me find that.
Just because you're talking about methodology anyway, in terms of the way he, he's asking leading questions. The conclusion is included in the question.
We're about 5 days
Let's see what
and
it is.
nights together in an enormous section of wilderness that I say
We're
is
going to run to
currently
5230.
wild giant primates that currently are unrecognized by modern science.
My name is John Bindernagel. I'm a wildlife biologist. I live on Vancouver Island, British Columbia. I have a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and a PhD from the University of Wisconsin, Madison. Right now we're in a research site in Western Alberta, not so far from Nordegg. And this is a site to which Todd Standing has invited me to spend time with him for 5 days. What's been particularly interesting to me is some sign that Todd Standing interprets as Sasquatch sign, which I had reservations about when I arrived, but about which I'm changing my mind. The most outstanding form of sign is these structures, these teepee-like, this teepee-like array of leaning pine sapling stems, which I thought were completely random and natural. But having traveled in this country for 5 days now and seen no other such structures except in the area where he's observed Sasquatches, I'm now willing to conclude that these are associated with the presence of Sasquatches.
All right.
And how many days of browbeating? Yes.
So that is a classic example of, we used the phrase earlier, and it's a phrase that's often used. It's called begging the question, right? And you'll typically hear people say, like, where some kind of conclusion seems to lead to other questions, like, if I see evidence of Bigfoot, that begs the question, how did they survive out here this long, right? But that is not what begging the question really means. Begging the question has to do with circular reasoning and the idea that the assuming the answer to prove the answer. So listen to what he says there very carefully. He basically is saying, and if you want to replay it one more time, it's really only a few seconds.
52. Was it from 5230?
No, it's from probably like 52:15, 52:10 through 52:30, 20 seconds.
There we go. I got to 08. Play it again.
John Bindernagel. I'm a wildlife biologist. I live on Vancouver Island, British Columbia. I have a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and a PhD from the University of Wisconsin, Madison. Right now we're in a research site in Western Alberta, not so far from Nordegg. And this is a site to which Todd Standing has invited me to spend time with him for 5 days. What's been particularly interesting to me is some sign that Todd Standing interprets as Sasquatch sign, which I had reservations about when I arrived, but about which I'm changing my mind. The most outstanding form of sign is these structures, these teepee-like, this teepee-like array of leaning pine sapling stems, which I thought were completely random and natural. But having traveled in this country for 5 days now and seen no other such structures except in the area where he's observed Sasquatches, I'm now willing to conclude that these are associated with the presence of Sasquatches, which has been...
All right, pause right there. He's willing to... What they're out there to prove is that Sasquatches exist, right? So what you need to do, if you're doing the correct scientific method, is interpret independently evidence until you can lead to that conclusion. What he's doing is saying, okay, I see these structures. I thought they looked like natural structures. But since they only seem to be around where Todd Standing says he sees Bigfoot, which has not yet been proven, that therefore they are proof of Bigfoot. It's circular reasoning. And that is begging the question. It's assuming the answer to arrive at the conclusion that you wanted to arrive at in the first place. Bigfoot must exist because these structures are only where Todd Standing says he sees Bigfoot, and therefore they must have been created by Bigfoot. But that's a tightly packed circle.
It's not far off of scientific method, though. It's not. So because scientific method, you make something up So you make a guess, and then you try to prove that guess. So I believe Bigfoots are making structures, and then I have to work and prove that point, which is slightly different than what they're doing.
Right. And you notice that he says at the end, he concludes, because they're only in the area where Todd Standing says he's Bigfoot, he's now ready to conclude that they have to do with Bigfoot. But he has yet to prove that Bigfoot exists. He's only proven that the structures exist.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a circle.
Starting from his data is flawed, because he's
starting from the conclusion to use evidence to prove the conclusion. And that is what's called begging the question in philosophical terms. But circular reasoning,
and this is a guy who is going to be very suggestible as well. He's been out in the woods for a few days, older boy, wants to find something, and Todd Standing has been browbeating him for days relentlessly on all of the things he's seen, and the way he talks about it, it's very much leading. So that looks like I think that's Bigfoot. Even when there was a bit with footprints. And I'm not going to go back to it, where they found these footprints and he kept telling the other doctor to put his foot in there. And every time he stepped on the moss, the footprint got deeper and deeper. And it almost was like Todd Standing was subconsciously showing how he made that big footprint. Because every time he stepped into one of the other footprints, it was starting to get deeper and deeper, and it was starting to open up and look like the other one. So it's everything is very much leading down a specific direction. And there was one other thing I wanted to go back to with regard to, because at one point he thanks the Wildlife Service and rescue or something, and he mentioned something about a grizzly encounter. So he mentioned he had a grizzly encounter at one point, and I think what he's representing is Bigfoot footage, because he sounds scared as shit in this encounter. I think he's scared that there's a grizzly bear on him.
Tremendously successful.
I think this is it.
I lost my video camera because they actually.
So for anybody who hasn't seen, this is, according to him, evidence of Bigfoot. So this video here is something that Dr. Meldrew, I forget what the other guy's name is, myself, probably you, Andrew, wanted him to spend the whole time investigating. This is all he had as far as imagery. Still images sitting down, not it running off, not it showing up. He's claiming that he's in a ghillie suit. He's been sitting there for hours, and they're looking for him. So again, why aren't more people finding him? If these Bigfoots, these Sasquatch are searching him, these day watchers are finding him.
And logs and branches at me to the point where it injured me.
For the next 3 days, as I returned to base camp, this group of Sasquatch harassed me relentlessly.
After sleeping less than 30 minutes, I was awakened by rocks that were thrown at me and growling sounds from multiple directions. After 2 nights of this, I'd had enough, so you'll see me here crack open one of my.
Did you hear him
flares.
say "fuck"? Damn it! Did you hear like the way he reacted to me? That was the most authentic line in this whole film. That to me, I was wondering if that's him afraid that he's actually run into a grizzly bear.
Actually threw stones and logs and branches at me to the point where it injured me.
For the next 3 days, as I returned to base camp, this group of Sasquatch harassed me relentlessly.
After sleeping less than 30 minutes, I was awakened by rocks that were thrown at me and growling sounds from multiple directions. After 2 nights of this, I'd had enough, so you'll see me here crack open one of my big flares. These growling sounds you hear are from 6 to 10 yards away, again in multiple directions. Now you can hear rocks thrown at me and various animals closing in on me from multiple positions.
So here's why I think that's a real encounter with a real animal. If you go to the other scenes where he is being encountered by Sasquatch, he's like, "Hey, big boy. Hey, it's Todd. I've got some apples for you." And that was like making the noises I would make if I saw a bear. Lighting flares. Fuck. He's run into some grizzly bears. He referenced it at one point in the film, an encounter with grizzlies. He's seen this, and he's like, you know what? This is going to be my Sasquatch moment here. I'm going to be sharing this as Sasquatch evidence.
Yeah, good footage, right? Yeah.
But that's my view. So I think we've pretty much covered what this film was about. There was scenes later in where he goes and he sees Jeff Meldrum, and maybe I can even find the image of him sitting in his office and Jeff Meldrum looking like he's a captive. He's a hostage here.
Yeah, we both had that same comment that this poor bastard.
Where is it? Oh, come on, let me see. Get a good scene here. So in this scene, he's So in this scene, he's come back and he's reviewing the footage where Jeff Meldrum said he thought he saw something, and he is coming back to his office to finish the job, to sell him on the notion that he saw Sasquatch, even to the point where he said, high five, we found something. And the doctor's like, well, yeah, maybe. And they actually cut right at that point as well. So there was some selective editing. So I think just to sort of summarize on this, or to wrap up, the only value I got out of this film was this conversation here. I had there was no value in watching it. This film from the get-go was implausible and lacked any sort of credibility or any attempt at going near the scientific method. It was a car salesman trying to get some biologists on board with his faked evidence. And that was all I could pull from it. If anything, it made me believe that I actually maybe more likely to believe that there are no Sasquatch than actually push me in the direction that there are Bigfoot.
Yeah, listen, I was not a believer when this video started, and I mean, what I found interesting was, I think you kind of referenced this to make it full circle, is that if you were trying to make I've certainly seen more effective presentations of people proving that there are big feet than this. You know what I mean? Like, he seems to have the goods with the photographs, and people, you can look up yourself. There's a website, right, that I showed you where
I can share that with you, actually.
All right.
So you can go into it if you want to introduce it. I'll pull it on the screen.
Well, I was looking at standing like Sean, and there isn't really a lot out there about him. But what you find out is that even in the Bigfoot community, he's considered something of a joke, and a joke, an annoyance, because the real quote unquote big feet people are like, these hoaxers are just ruining our actual pursuit of these things that really exist. Here's a photograph of Todd standing. Here's a photograph of one of the photographs he supposedly took of Bigfoot, and you can see I don't know if GIF will. Oh, there it goes. Right, that it's clearly they can show you how he mapped the Bigfoot face using Photoshop, and a reasonable job of it in terms of technical prowess, but it's really just his face.
It could be too. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. This could be, because this is also what we have to take into account. That part of the article here is Bigfoot is 100% real breathing creature. But,
right.
So these
people make the fair point that Todd Standing, after his documentary came out, first of all, the Todd Standings and his wife own a production company, which should be a red flag for anybody, and that he filed frivolous but attempt at attention-getting lawsuits in Canada, and now he's got one in the U.S. The lawsuits are meant to basically force the government to acknowledge the existence of Bigfoot and then take conservationist efforts to preserve it. But again, it's like a Miracle on 34th Street trying to prove there's a Santa Claus in court. That's a movie.
Canada threw out that.
It certainly did, right? Exactly. And the burden of proof obviously rests with him, as I said to you. There's no. You can sit around and posit there's horizontally striped tigers all you want, but you got to prove it. I'm not going to sit around trying to disprove the existence of such things. And he just falls well short of the mark, as everyone does. But even in presentation, he had stuff that he could have presented better, but again, he made himself rather than material the star of the show. This could have been a more effective attempt at proving the existence of these things than it really was.
And I think the issue is going to come down to his inability to do so. his knowledge. I mean, even his knowledge. I question some of the even just him being out in the woods in survival situations in high tops. I found that weird as somebody who does a lot of hiking and a lot of outdoor stuff. It's not unusual. So people that do the cross country walks here will usually wear running shoes because they're really comfortable when you're walking 20 miles a day, 10 miles a day. But for somebody who's in the back country like that, there was a scene where he was measuring out Bigfoot steps. He was in a pair of what looked like basketball shoes. And I found that weird for somebody who's supposed to be an outdoorsman, a trained, tracker, to wear high tops. But that's not, I mean, it's possible. It's possible that he just prefers to wear high tops. They are comfortable. So I'm not going to begrudge him on that.
Right. Well, again, this gets back to the goal of the film, right? Is the goal of the film to make any kind of attempt to really show? Is that what he is concerned about? Is making any case for Bigfoot, or is it to make himself a star? And I think that's really the issue. He's trying to make himself a star. It's an extended audition. If somebody liked this thing and offered him a contract to go cryptozoology chasing, any other animals of mythical, like go find a griffin, let's go find whatever, aliens, let's go find, he would, that's what this is about, is not about making any legitimate effort to prove that there is a Bigfoot.
So in the end, I think collectively we give it 2 thumbs down. It's shit. It's not worth watching. I would say on a scale, Hugh and I will do a scale on 1 to 10. If I were to put this on a scale of 1 to 10, my wife would give it a 0. And she was really annoyed that I paid to rent it again so I could share it with everybody today.
I didn't have to pay over here in the States. It's included in Amazon Prime.
Yeah, well, I ended up having to pay to get it again. But if I were to give it a score, I would give, I think Dr. Meldrum was the most legit thing in that. So I'll give some points for bringing him into the process. So I'm going to give it a 3. No, 2. I'm going to give it a 2 out of 10.
Well, I mean, let me see. As a piece of presentation, like I said, I have seen more effective versions of this documentary. Dr. Meldrum is fine. Kind of like I think you and I said at the beginning, even more so than The Office. The Office scene almost seems sort of anticlimactic with the video.
Yeah.
When he's first out there in the woods, they're definitely, and he's being asked all those leading aggressive questions by Todd Standing. Don't you think this is Bigfoot? Don't you think this is Bigfoot? He really looks like a guy who realizes he's with someone who's truly unstable and is just trying to keep him calm so he can get out of the situation. So he's and so I give him credit for surviving the experience, because I do think that Todd Standing, if he had his fixed delusion challenged, it might, although I don't know if he really legitimately holds it or not. But bottom line is, I would say that as a documentary, 0. I agree with your wife.
Yeah, it's bad. It's bad.
Now, if I were rating it instead, like its unintentional comedic value, it's better in the first half than the second half. Once he leaves the trail, it kind of, I was having the same film for the first hour.
Yeah, it's very redundant. It's the same thing.
Yeah, so I would give it, on that scale, it's worth a watch for the first hour, if you have a couple beers with your buddies and you want to have a good laugh.
Exactly.
But turn it off after about an hour.
All right, well, we're going to go on to the next section and another new intro. Goosebumps. Wow. I think people that are watching the show are going to think we've made it to the next level.
We have.
It's a big moment for us to have those intros.
Yeah, and I arrived just in time, right, to be here for the unveiling of the news show, the highly produced show.
Yes. So you'll see down there in the banner, we review viewer submitted evidence proving there was wide-scale election fraud. And last week we had a conversation about Rand Paul on the Senate floor and on multiple interviews claiming, and Rand Paul, I find to be fairly objectionable, more so now than, let's say, I did 3 or 4 years ago. He's definitely changed his colors. And when we look at Rand Paul making claims like that, they're very, in my view, I thought surely there must be some evidence then to be making such a claim that's so destabilizing for somebody who's so, constitutional in his views, so very very old school Republican Rand Paul. Government shouldn't be involved, to where now he's trying to get government involved in a narrative of election fraud, which is still largely unproven. And if you may be able to correct me on this, as the resident politics expert now on the Bearded Philosophy channel, elections are regulated by the state governments, aren't they?
Of course.
So that's elected officials. This isn't just like, a group of volunteers rocking up and counting papers. These are, trained and, appointed people that are overseeing these elections.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes.
Last week we oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, and the fact of the matter is, this was in fact, I've read several studies that would suggest this was the most secure election in the history of the United States, which, if you think about it, shouldn't really be surprising, because the move to paper ballot, or the move to mail-in balloting and computerization, provides for many more checks than, like somebody showing up, like, just think about, like, think about it this way. I as I mentioned to you as we were preparing to do this show, I'm a big fan of unsolved mysteries. One of the things about unsolved mysteries, because the show's from the 80s and early 90s, there were a lot of segments about, escaped murderers or escaped prisoners, or people who did something and then went on the lam, con men, whatever. And they always have multiple identifications, right? Like they have names and driver's licenses and in 7 states under 7 different names. All that stuff was way easier to do 15, 30 years ago than it is today. With every passing year, it becomes more difficult as computerized tracking and cross-referencing databases inside of states become more and more comprehensive. It's just harder and harder and harder to acquire, the way you used to get a fake ID, like a truly fake ID, and that's something you were using to get into the club when you were 18 and the age was 21, but like something that you could run around and use and get a job with, was that a lot of states did not cross birth and death records. So you could find, let's say, like some child who had unfortunately died at a very young age, request their birth certificate claiming to be that person, and there wouldn't be a lot of cross-reference checking. You get the birth certificate, and then with the birth certificate you could then turn around, because they wouldn't cross-reference it even to see that the child died. You just claim to be John Smith, who died when he was 4, but they don't look at that. They, if you can give the address, if you can find the name and get the address, you can basically, the address you can make up, but like if you find the name and the basic birthday, which you could use for an obituary search, and then next thing you know, you have a birth certificate that'll let you get a social security card, which then in turn lets you get a passport, a driver's license, and on we go. And that's how it was done. You couldn't do any of that today. Not any of it.
And this is why, I don't know if you're probably familiar with the Brennan Center. I believe this is what it's called, a Republican think tank that's investigated.
I'm not with that. No, but,
I did some reading, and one of the resources that keeps coming up is the Brennan Center, which it's a Republican think tank who's investigated the history of election fraud, and the instances of election fraud are minute historically. And what generally you find are these types of fraudulent cases are only propagated in local elections, because you can organize to a degree that you can impact on a smaller scale. You couldn't organize. And this was the point I made last week, and we got a lot of static for this. One of the main points I made, and we had comments on it, was there's no way that there's no conceivable way you can organize 8 million, 5 million, 1 million, even 500,000 votes to be turned from one to the other, because of all the systems in place to prevent that. So this was one of the comments I had coming in, and there was a few, some of which were more colorful than others. There was one gentleman that was really, what did he say? It was very negative towards us, and I wanted him to, he erased it straight away, because I like pinning the negative comments so everyone can see them. I think it's good advertising, to be fair. I love it when we get the trolls. But with this was somebody saying, look, no shouting, just highlighting. He wrote in all caps, Joe Biden did not win the presidential election. He stole it from more than 74 million of voters who voted for Trump. Here is the guy who has a method to check on whether or not the 2020 presidential election was in fact fraud. I'm intrigued. I thought, why don't we give the people who watched, who took time out, the opportunity to share this. Now, I did watch it in advance because I wanted to go through some due diligence, but this video came up and this was a fascinating video for me. So I'm just going to cue it up.
All right.
Ooh, I need to change here because my other account is ad free. So bear with.
Oh,
So whilst I'm bringing that up, Andrew, I take it what are your views on election fraud in this election? I would assume that you don't believe there's much to it, or am I wrong? And you do think there's something to it?
I don't think there's much to it. And in fact, again, I mean, everything is becoming more secure that way. I mean, think about the transition to mail-in ballots again. One of the issues, like, so I work the polls every year in my.
Ooh, you're one of them.
Well, no, because I'm a Democratic committee person. So I'm there to. Yeah, I'm not there. I mean, because the poll workers have to be nonpartisan, right? I'm there to, basically shake hands with people as they come through the door, give them a last, rah, rah, go Democrats. And then at the end of the night, I observe the count. And there's always a Republican person there as well. And we always get along, by the way, because, you become brothers in arms when you've been there for 12 hours all day. Or 13 actually. By the end, it's you're shooting the crap with them, and you go in, you observe the count. But in Pennsylvania and a lot of states, when you move to mail-in ballots, see, before this year, there were electronic voting machines where you went in, you pushed a button, and you walked out, and at the end of the night, the machine produced a receipt. But the only way the vote was recorded was by the pushing of that button, which was an electronic, kind of like a calculator or something. +1 for Biden, +1 for Trump, and it was all done inside the microprocessors and of the basically computerized machine. With the mail-in ballots, those all have a paper trail. You can hand count ballots that were, and even now they switched it. So inside the polling place, people were filling out slips of paper, which is more secure because at the end of the night, if someone says, well, machine spit out this number, you better have that number of ballots to match what the machine says.
So here's a question.
By paper machine.
This is something in Georgia, for example. One of the things that made it difficult for any narrative, in my view, before I watch this video, I won't give my opinion on what I thought after. It may have changed my mind. But when they audited the votes in Georgia, and when you look at those Dominion machines, it prints off a copy of what you voted for. So you confirm, yep, that's what I want to do. It gives you a print off. You take that to the poll worker, but the Dominion machine counts the vote. And you then have a paper record you can audit and cross-reference. Was that not the case in Pennsylvania?
That's what I mean. You do. You have a paper record. Exactly. You blacken. It's like for those of you who took like standardized tests in school, where you blacken a circle next to the name. That's exactly what the first election Pennsylvania was using them. But you had a paper ballot. You got a receipt. Well, not a receipt, but like
it was confirmation of your vote.
Yeah, it was confirmation that you voted. And the paper ballot was kept by the machine so that the machine did count them electronically and spit out numbers. But if someone said, I don't believe those numbers, first of all, you have people coming in. Every person who comes in to vote has to sign in. So you have a count being kept, how many people came to the polling place. They're each given one ballot. So the count at the table has to match the count of the ballots that the machine, when you add it all up. Like you can't have, people cannot vote for different offices. So you could come in and vote for president, but not for governor or whatever. But you can't. What you can't have is the machine have any one office have a number higher than the number of people who actually voted, right? And then so you have that check. Then you have the papers. If something goes wrong, you can go through and hand count papers. And really, there's really no way. So then you say, well, okay, couldn't I come in? Like if I know that Joe Blow down the street isn't voting, couldn't I come in and sign his name and pretend to be Joe Blow? Because after all, Pennsylvania, there's no ID check. Well, I mean, theoretically, you could do that, but you have a couple of obstacles. First, you'd have to know for a fact Joe Blow's not voting, because if you come in and try it and get caught, you will be arrested. Two, you'd have to know that they didn't mail in their ballot. Again, I mean, that's like the same thing. And three, with 65, I mean, this is going to go to your point. I mean, the turnout in these types of elections, especially, makes it such that it's easier, as you said, to do it in a local election because so many fewer people vote.
Yeah.
If you just wanted to random guess based on voting patterns, okay, we know that this person only votes in presidential years, so we're going to try this in one of the non-presidential years. You'd have a reasonable shot at guessing correctly. But in presidential years, things are off the charts. People show up to vote. And if you vote twice under any name, I mean, you're going like there's going to be a problem, and you'd have to find individuals to come and do that. It's not a practical thing to do in any grave numbers. I will say, though, that the governor of Texas, because the one thing is, of course, in the United States, each state has its own voting rules, voting machines. Even they go down by county. So this county will have these voting machines, that county will have those voting machines within the same state. So there are, it's a decentralized process. It sounds like, oh, well, that means there could be fraud, but actually it prevents fraud on a mass scale because your methodology for defrauding in, Cobb County, Texas is different from your methodology for doing fraud in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. What works there wouldn't work here. You'd have to have this incredibly coordinated effort. It's not practical. And I will say, as I started to say, the reason I brought up Texas is that, was it the governor of Texas, the LG, the Attorney General, I guess, of Texas sued Pennsylvania, or attempted to sue Pennsylvania for voting procedures, which Texas does not have standing to do, and was thrown out immediately. But he offered, I think it was $3 million for evidence in Pennsylvania of voting fraud. Well, our lieutenant governor, it was their lieutenant governor who made this challenge in Texas. Our lieutenant governor, John Fetterman, because we did find, I think, in a single instance of voting fraud in Pennsylvania was someone trying to vote for Trump who was not on the rolls. So it was actually a voting fraud attempt for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, okay, the lawsuit was, well, we did prove that there was voting fraud. So where's our $3 million?
Yeah. We've got the guy. Yeah, one less for Trump.
So there you go.
So on this, so what I want to do is I want to look at some of the evidence because I'm very much on board with you, and I might, if I'm smart enough, put a link up here when we replay this. I did a video where I examined, and I spent a long time investigating mail-in ballots because I got into a lot of debates with people when I actually was doing that. I've stopped debating politics with people on Facebook because it's a zero-sum game at the end of the day.
Correct.
But when I look at mail-in ballots, I am of the belief that is the most, and this is somebody who works with tech, works for a tech company, and believes, and I don't even write on pen and paper anymore. So I am not somebody who is a technophobe by any stretch. However, the mail-in ballot, for the same reason you highlighted about, the differentiating process is making it hard to, make a wide-scale campaign to defraud the voting system. Having those mail-in ballot processes in place, it makes it impossible in my view, because every polling station is a house now. Every ballot has a name and a QR code on it or some sort of an identifier to that individual. And to be able to coordinate at, let's say everybody's voting by mail. So there's going to be 150 million registered voters or 170 million or something like that. How are you going to coordinate what people are going to do at every individual location where a ballot is sent, how they're going to send it in? Are they going to bring it in by hand or are they going to post it in? But this gentleman here, so this was the first video. And Michael, thank you if you are watching this, thank you for putting it in. I'm going to go over it. I'm not going to be a dick if I don't agree with it, but if there are things in here, and there are things that I found problematic in this video, and I want to share with you, Andrew, as well. I found it fascinating, and this character that we're going to be looking at, I found extremely fascinating. So this gentleman is an expert who this channel has brought in, that he can prove whether a ballot is fake or not in seconds. So I'm going to play this now, and hopefully you can hear it.
Your background. I mean, it's so impressive with all the patents and everything that you've received.
I'm going to let it play.
Of your background in technology and also in making things simple.
Now, don't get thrown when I say this, because when you look at me, I'm a nerd. I'm hiding out in a biker's body, so don't get thrown by that, because I don't look like your typical nerd. But I'm actually one of the most granted patent authors, not only in the United States, but in the world. And most people know me for what's called Scan Connect, Scan Commerce, or Scan Detect platforms. And that's where, when you use your mobile phone, you actually scan a barcode or you scan a Q code and it loads up on your phone, or now you track any product by it, or you see it on any grocery store shelf. I'm the fellow that created that platform, originally called CRQ, C, our cube, and shortened to Q code. And now it's on about 12 billion devices around the globe can do it. And so when I started looking at these ballots and everybody talking about, well, codes can't be hacked and these things are so hard to detect, I realized that everybody was speaking geek. And so here's a good example. When you now go to an airport and you don't use a boarding pass and the code's on your phone and you do it, that's me. That was a very simple explanation. When you now go through toll tags and you no longer have to roll down your window and chunk the change and don't hit the brick wall, but it now records the transaction and dings your card or your shopping cart, that's me. Old days when we had computers and we finally looked at the phone and it would look wonky, but now it adjusts, that's me. So I have a deep history in making this stuff work, but also explaining it. And it's a real simple fact to prove that there was massive fraud in this election.
Okay, so I'm going to stop it there. Actually, let me stop it there. So what were your thoughts on that opening? What he was saying, why he was saying it? Just, I'm curious because I haven't really gotten your take as such. I just explained to you yesterday that I was going to be sharing this. So what are your initial thoughts on this as an opener?
Well, I mean, my first thoughts are he claims to have invented a variety of technologies that are, first of all, I mean, like the resizing of the screen, the QR code, the passing through like an easy pass. These are, he doesn't even seem to understand that, for example, going through the easy pass lane is not the same thing as using your phone to barcode. He conflate the two of them. I don't know if it's because he doesn't understand or he's just trying to make claims that are
he's got his hand in a lot of technological
right. And then the screen resizing has nothing to do with either one of those things. So he's either the most prolific computer genius of our times, which is a little surprising therefore, because I can certainly name Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Steve Jobs, Cook, even
Elon.
Well, he's Tesla, but what's the?
I'd say he's a tech giant.
What's the name of the other guy? Steve Jobs, Steve Wojciechowski, right? Is the
Apple, the Great Woz.
The Great Woz was Kowski, right? Was Drewski? I can't remember. I'm blanking on the
Wozniacki.
Wojciechowski, right? I also am a big fan, as you know, of computer history, actually. So I can go back and really name, the pioneers of the early days of computing. I just was watching something about Google and a documentary on Google and the beginnings of Google. And I've never heard of this guy. And he's, you know what I mean? He's somebody who claims to have his hand in some of the biggest technologies ever.
Yeah. So can I jump in because Michael, I'm going to speak to you. Hopefully you're watching. And I want to do this respectfully as well, because right away I've got a massive problem with this. And Andrew, I think you spotted the same things I did, except I have the benefit of having done my homework. Because for the same reason that my view on Todd Standing made it difficult for me to believe whatever he said after the first scene. This is kind of where I'm at with this first video presentation that was given to me as proof that there's fraud in the election. Because he's now representing things that I can very quickly, in about 10 minutes, look up and find are fraudulent. So the first thing that made me kind of, who is this guy? His surname is Pulitzer. And I thought, oh, he's an inventor with the name Pulitzer. That's quite cool. You don't see that too often.
No.
And I did some research and I came across this article when I looked, this was the first thing that came up. And you'll appreciate this. J. Javon Filial, the chairman, chief executive of Digital Convergence Corp. What do you do once you've built companies such as Belo Corp, Radio Shack, Young and Rubicam, and Coca-Cola of investments between 10 million and 37.5 million for a product that flops? You change your name. Filial, the masterful pinchman between the QCat, acutely named handheld bar code scanner that was supposed to bridge print media and the web, apparently now does business under the name J. Hutton Pulitzer, or the one-word moniker Javon. Operating J. Hutton Pulitzer & Co. out of Dallas, the inventor of what has been decried as one of the most ridiculous products of the internet era now specializes in the development of unique intellectual property such as bottled rainwater crystals, and the forthcoming book entitled Generational Curses, Will Javon Be Foiled Again? Now, I did check this because...
Hold on a second, because I got to say something here. Did you notice in the video, because he changed, I didn't notice this yesterday, but if you could play just a brief, just as he started his introduction.
Yeah.
Play it one more time, just for a second.
I'm going back. I think we're, oh no, it's a little bit further back. Okay, there we go.
Tell us a little of your background in technology and also in making things simple.
Now, don't get thrown when I say this, because when you look at me, I'm a nerd. I'm hiding out in a biker's body, so don't get thrown by that, because I don't look like your typical nerd. But I'm actually one of the most granted patent authors, not only in the United States, but in the world.
Is that what you wanted, or what are we looking for?
No, you could talk about that. Keep going for just a second.
Okay, before we go on, can I comment on that?
Yeah, please.
We're there. So I looked up patent. So I had to do some research, and I looked up who was the most prolific patent author in this year historically. His name wasn't on the list. Now, the thing that's lovely about patents is you can look up who's got patents. This is open source information. This isn't, you have to, because if I want to patent something, I need to check that I'm not stealing somebody's idea. And he had, to be fair to him, he would have made quite a bit of money. And I have a lot of respect for what he's doing. He's got skin in the game. He is grafting. He's got about 106 or 177 patents that I found currently active. And they are in technology specific to do with barcodes and scanning, but there's nothing to do with Q codes. Now, QR codes, which he's referring to, which is me. QR codes actually were, I Googled that. They were patented by a company called DensoWave. It's a Japanese company. It was patented 25 years ago, so well before even the QCat came out. So he's not responsible for QR codes. And he's also, and I'm sure 106 is a lot of patents to be authoring, but the people who are leading the way, the individual authors for just 2020 alone had patented about 4,000 to 5,000 things per person. So he's a little way off of that. So right away, I've got some. That's another credibility issue. But I'll play it, and you let me know when to stop.
Hold on 1 second before you, because I do have something to say about that. I don't know what you know about United States patent law, but it's awful. And having 170 patents, not only is it compared to the most prolific patenters, that's just an outright lie. But I would probably wager that the most prolific patenters are themselves problematic, because basically you can imagine it, you can patent it. The fact that you've patented, like, let's say I could think of like a flying glass that I would drink. If I can make a drawing of a glass that would fly with rockets coming out of the bottom and little wings, then I can patent it. It has nothing to do with whether or not you could actually build such.
I couldn't find anything to say, because I did look that up. I did say, okay, so do I need a proof of a functional concept? No. You need proof that it is a concept that you can represent and that you can prove that's not somebody else's idea, but you don't have to prove that it's a working design.
Yeah, that it's actually possible. You just have to be able to draw it and imagine it. Furthermore, because of this, you can get patents on all kinds of stuff that. There's also copyright stuff that you can manipulate. So you see a lot of brands that in the US that go out of business, but then still are around, and they exist solely as shell companies so that people can go around and basically sue people for trying, because what happens is a defunct brand with a recognizable word mark gets picked up by off-brand manufacturers in China and places like that, but somebody else will pick up the intellectual property. They don't make anything. They just their production is that they sue people who use defunct. There's a lot of bad stuff in the law around this guy.
So he's not really represented himself as anybody who's an authority with his most prolific patent author in the world. He said worldwide, to make the claim such as he's not a stupid individual. I don't believe he's stupid, but I don't know why he thinks he can say, and that's why I'm wondering, maybe I misunderstood it. Maybe I'm not being fair to say QR codes. You scan something on the device, 12 billion using it. That's me. And then the thing that you mentioned was like Easy Pass. He references the toll booths. And I Googled that just to make sure. I thought, well, maybe it is like barcodes, because he used barcodes, which barcodes were invented in 1983. That's when I found the patent for a barcode. 83. It was way, way long ago.
Yeah.
But they actually use transponders. So they're not even using, they're using more, not GPS, but they're using sensor technology that I looked through. I must have looked at, and to be fair, maybe he's got a patent that I couldn't find. But I read through all of his patents, like the headlines. Most of them were sensors in the medical field. Couldn't find anything related to that. But just to the fact that it's not even related to what he's talking about, transponders. It's not.
Remember too, with patent law, you can make a very tiny variation to an existing patent, and you can patent that. And you know what I mean? And so again, there are patent mongers, people who just, because then they'll use their patent to try to sue people with vaguely similar technologies, which is again part of the history of computing when you look into it. Like how many companies were, basically patenting things they had no working concept, no working prototype of, they had no proof of concept. They could either take a patent that already existed and tweak it slightly because they could imagine it, and then try to sue people for using their patent. But if you could go back and play what I was looking for, because I didn't even notice this yesterday when he introduced me to this video, in his little introduction, after he talks about
the right thing.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Go ahead, play it.
Nerd, but I'm actually one of the most granted patent authors, not only in the United States, but in the world.
What a legend.
And most people know me for what's called Scan Connect.
Stop right there.
And,
no, most people know. You changed your name, pal.
So that is a massive problem. Mr. Filial, who's now Mr. Pulitzer, is what he's known for is no longer connected to his name. So his cat. And the thing is, I don't think he should be. In a way, I have a lot of respect for him selling the idea of, and the whole problem with his invention. This is a fascinating character. The whole problem with his invention was you have something attached to an old like IBM, white IBM, green screen, big heavy computer that scans products so you can buy them. It's problematic because it's not something like people don't. There was never any need for that. And we actually have a comment here I'll get to in a second. So you can. Hey Veg, how we doing? We have one of our regulars on. I'll fill you in a second, Andrew. But where was I going with this? See, I'm terrible with comments. Veg knows this. So anyway, yeah. So there was
the old bulky computer, so you can buy things.
And what Veg said, and actually it's similar to what you're saying, they can sue people for using their patent, but they can also just simply sell it, right? So you might be able to better answer this. I think they can sell a product that's got a patent on it. So I can sell a product that's like a water bottle that uses the same technology as a Nalgene water bottle. But where does the patent come into play? I can't take that design and claim it as my own because I can sell something that's very similar to that patent.
Are you asking me?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is to that.
Well, I mean, if you have a patent on it, you can sell it. But I mean, I heard that you're talking about the commenter selling patents. That's another little scam game that you can play. Like, because if you can beat somebody to imagining something, then they want to but you don't actually have the product. But now there's somebody with a patent that's similar enough that you're like, oh Christ, if I do this, then they're going to sue me. Mm. So you can basically hold their actual working item hostage with a patent, that you cooked up out of your imagination that has no ties to any real product. It's basically a way of, gaining leverage to get a settlement before a lawsuit. Yeah. But this
is why Apple releases their patents. You can tell what Apple are going to do because they patent products before they even start to design them. Because there's a lot of employees and they don't want, squirrels to get out.
Right. So what do we also want to blow away the competition before, so that somebody's not ahead of them. But go ahead.
Why don't we jump ahead here to Javon? Because I did listen to this. So when these comments came across, I wanted to give it the time of day. So let's just assume, because where he's going to with this is he has technology, and that I believe. He's got his team have put together a device that can scan the document. He's going to talk about next, and I'm not going to go into it. He talks about it about this point, and I didn't know this was a thing. that he can tell if there is folds. And his theory was that, and I didn't know this was at all something that was an issue. If there's no folds, therefore it's not a legit mail-in ballot, because he makes the statement that mail-in ballots are the problematic ones. So therefore, if there's no artifact in the scan to show a fold, it couldn't have been posted. So therefore, it was just inserted as a flat piece of paper. Now, I Googled, and I only have Google to work with, which is the biased media, fine. But I haven't been able to find any information or any even...
You got to use DuckDuckGo, Sean.
I should have used the non-Google search, because it's biasing my results. But I couldn't find any accusations in any article that people were receiving non-folded ballots. Even the way they store them is folded. So I really didn't pay much attention to this.
That's
but he
ridiculous on his face, because the fold would have to go across the Q code, which if it's properly designed wouldn't do, because that would interfere with scanning the Q. That could potentially
he's saying simply,
the Q code.
He's saying not that it's going to impact the scan. He's saying that not that the fold's going to have a problem with counting the vote. The fold will indicate that it must be fake, because every mail-in ballot was folded. Therefore, if I find a ballot with no evidence of a fold, somebody's implanted that into the mix.
I see.
I'm going to play a bit more here.
That's the only flat one that's supposed to be in there. The problem is that's not the truth. So here's the cause and effect of it. We're supposed to have the envelopes. They need the envelope to check against the signature. That's how that works. Why do we not have envelopes? Well, we don't have the second part of the envelope is because, well, there were never any envelopes. And that's where we found the legal teams are trying to talk too technical, too geeky. They're relying on the Big Bang Theory to give you the algorithm, and judges and lawyers don't understand it, and they're simply asking for the wrong evidence.
So what should they be asking for, and what can our visitors to everylegalvote.com do to demand that we get this information? You said we own the information. It belongs to the American people. You said that this is a scientific, proper process to evaluate that information. This is something that's used in courts all the time to determine whether there's counterfeits or frauds or whatever. So the court should accept this as good data, whatever you produce. And we haven't gotten that because the lawyers haven't asked for it yet. What should they be asking for?
It's not an issue of looking for hanging chads or bad data or machine data or coding to a German server. It's the simplicity of we, the American people, own those physical ballots by law. We, the American people, own those scanned copies. They are scanned in at a high level, so you know it's a very big file. We only need access to audit, not audit on tech terms, but audit on very simple visual terms. Now, they'll tell you they're exposing person's personal information. Well, technically, it's not there. It's already been de-identified. And in my system, we can audit millions of these in a day automatically. So here's what it is. You want the right to see the physical ballot and the digital ballot natively off the machine in a native format, not file encrypted. Attorneys will ask for files, but they get them in an encrypted state that only belong to Dominion or others, and they don't get the key. Then they have to hack them. Well, if you have to hack the files, then you kind of kick the evidence out because they'll say you manipulated. No, right. Native physical scans of the files and physical ballots of the files. And then our systems can high-speed look at them, and we look for that feature called the kinematic fold. But is that it? No. We look to see, is the ballot real to begin with? Does it have all of the upper level encoding? That means the standards.
I'm going to paraphrase where he's going with this. So he's going to say they can examine the QR code and they can find out what printer it's from. They can find out that it's an authentic QR code. And he had said before this that there's multiple touch points in the process where it's not just going from your pen and paper, filling in the ballot, your signature, straight to count. It's going through a lot of touch points through the post office, through people verifying signatures, and so on. So that's where he's implying that there's an opportunity at multiple points for someone to swap that out for a phony ballot. I have a lot of thoughts on this. What's your take?
Fishing expedition.
It's ironic.
Well, first of all, he starts with there's a little bait and switch there, right? He starts with like we're not looking at they're looking for the wrong evidence fraud around the ballot. Da, da, da. We're only looking to see physically is the piece of paper what is scanned in. So in other words, that somehow that you're filling out a piece of paper that's been folded and that there's an appearance that it's scanned into the machine, but actually when you pull the image file you won't see the the telltale signs of the creasing that are present on the physical ballot, and that will be proof that there's not a one-to-one match paper to whatever, right? But then he starts talking about, well, upper level security of the queue. So he's changed image stream what we're looking at, right? I mean, I understand what he's trying to get at. I think again, you could do a paper recount, but without evidence, that's the beauty of this. You could do a paper recount of a paper hand recount of each ballot, instead of relying on the machine count. Is basically what he's asking for. He's asking for every state to be recounted. But keep in mind, among other things, that the places Joe Biden won by 7 million votes or whatever it was, right? But he largely did that because he won by 5 million votes in California and however many million votes in New York, right? The only margins that matter are in Pennsylvania, Georgia, Michigan, and Arizona, where recounts were, well, Michigan wasn't conducted because it was over 100,000, but difference. But in Pennsylvania and in Georgia and in Arizona, recounts were conducted. Because the margins were narrow. So this is just, I mean, relatively speaking, this is just, to me, this is, again, somebody looking for attention and coming up with a theory that, sounds plausible on its face, but again, would be extremely difficult to actually manipulate. Basically, the voting machine would have to be preloaded with fake images, or somebody sitting around filling out on election day fake ballot, to replace the real ballots and scanning in the fake ballots, and then of course the paper ballots. I don't even know how he'd go about this, because that only makes sense if you then trash or destroy the real mail-in ballots that came in.
There would be a lot of evidence to the that would show that there's all these ballots that were spoiled. And where I see this is very much, that was one of my thoughts was, okay, so how are you able to create a like for like ballot on ballots that you haven't even gotten yet? So let's say somebody's in the sorting office and you see a ballot for Donald Trump and you want to change that. Now that's forgetting the fact that ballots, you can go in just about every state online and check your ballot anyway after it's been counted. But putting that aside, you then need to very quickly create an authentic ballot with the signature, with the name and address already on there. So you have to somehow create a ballot that matches the one that you're swapping out for his system to pick that up. Now, for me, there was a whole lot of irony here and a bit of self-promoting going on, because the irony of this is he's saying the Dominion system, and there's a lot of mistakes here. We can't check the Dominion system. We don't trust these digital systems. I have a digital system that'll fix this, and it's to me
that's true.
It's thick with irony, and he wants to check all of the actual ballots are correct. Now these ballots you can check, and that's what Georgia are doing. They're auditing these ballots. They're checking the paper ballots to make sure that the record they have in the Dominion system is correct, because the Dominion system just counts. It scans and it counts. You still hold on to that paper copy, and Georgia has done a full audit. So there's a lot of issues that it's almost like we're trying. It is like a witch hunt. And Veg, who's a regular commenter, said they can't brackets shouldn't be verifying signatures. I'm curious to hear what you say, because Veg said this. I think it was last week. They shouldn't be verifying signatures if they're not credentialed to do that. They're having everyday people verify signatures. And before I get you to answer, there's one other point I wanted to raise on that. In some of those, because I actually found a link to the 234 affidavits that they used in the Michigan lawsuit. There was a number of people saying that they weren't verifying the signatures. or he mentioned that there's no envelope to verify the signatures. That's because that's done before the ballots get sent to the polling place to be counted. There's people that are verifying those signatures that are trained employees of the government who are verifying those signatures, unless I'm wrong about that. Now, Veg, you weren't here. Andrew actually has worked the polls, has run for office in Pennsylvania. What is your take on that? That we just have volunteers that are being asked to verify signatures?
Well, they're not volunteer. I mean, people are paid for their time. I won't say that. I mean, listen, is Veg suggesting that you need a handwriting expert to compare signatures? 180 million people voted. If we want to find out 5 years from now who won the election, we can get all the handwriting experts in America to compare, right? So yes, you're going to be relying on people whose expertise are not going to be credentialed handwriting experts to verify signatures. And it's going to be a quick visual inspection against the signature you have on file against the envelope. And again, you're right, Sean, the envelopes are separated. Once the signature is verified, then the ballot is separated from the envelope, and that's the end of that process. So the person then verifies the ballot against the machine count, won't have access to the signature because that will have been done, before the ballot has been opened. Also, to full disclosure, where I am at the live voting place. I am not in the mail-in. I'm not up at the county doing the mail-ins. So, although we do get always a certain number of, absentee votes mailed in to the polling place at the, they're part of the count that you're doing live, because they're absentee ballots that are done right there. And those signatures are verified by the election day workers, some of whom are volunteers. I will say that at the individual polling places. Up at the county where they're doing a mass opening, those people are paid.
Yeah, she has a follow-up comment, and I think this is a really good follow-up to that. But I made this point last week when you weren't on. We already verify signatures in banks and supermarkets with people that aren't, I guess, handwriting experts, and I don't think there's an expectation Veg would have that everybody's a handwriting expert. And even to that degree, I think historically, and this was the point that I made before, even before we were verifying signatures on voter ID, there was very low instances of voter fraud when we were just having people rock up and push a button and head on home. So Veg actually made the point. She's in New York.
But there was always a signature, because that's what you do, right? Like, so before.
I don't remember. I haven't voted in the States in 15 years. I've always done absentee since I've moved.
Before this system, I mean, and even now, today, if you go to vote live and in person, the voting person, so let's say I'm a poll worker at the polling location. I've got a book that's arranged alphabetically with all the registered voters in my precinct. And again, remember, I'm describing what happens in Bucks County in Pennsylvania. Every municipality or every county in every state might have a slightly different process. But what I'm also describing happened in Philadelphia County when I was living in Philadelphia. They have a book that has an alphabetical listing of all registered voters, and they have your signature on file from the first time you voted, because you sign it twice the first time you vote. And when you come the first time in Pennsylvania, you do have to show ID your first time. So then they compare it to your driver's license signature when you're first doing it. Thereafter, you just sign the book, and they are looking at your signature in the book, which is printed in the book, versus what you sign live and in front of them. If that
yeah, that makes sense.
There is, in other words, there is, and they are volunteers. They're watching you come in. And you have to keep in mind, these polling locations often, I mean, my polling location, for example, serves as a neighborhood where, big turnout year. I think we had about 1,500 people vote. And you vote every year. A lot of people are regulars. They know each other. This is a little neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
So, there aren't, I'm not saying that everybody knows everybody else. That's not the case. But,
I would say, though, that she is just to jump in.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, just to jump in. I think she's more referring to the mail-in ballots anyway. And one of the follow-up points she makes, which I think is I don't always agree with Veg on a lot of the hoops you have to jump through to prove. So my view is all of these claims that there's rampant fraud are a bit boy crying wolf to a degree. And I'm not a big fan of, we should invest a lot of time and money in making a system that's been working for years better, because there's no data to say there is an issue or has been an issue. That being said, she said, you don't have to wait a million years. And she's referencing your comment on, going back in time and then checking all the signatures again. But AI could do a better job. And I think there's something to be said for that. I think we have technology now that scans my face to a high degree and knows my face better than my fingerprint. And I think there is some scope to have, let's say, a visual verification, and then it's when it goes through, it cross references. I think there is a argument to be made in the future that you could use AI to cross check a signature better than a human could. I think that's a fair point to make.
I mean, in the future, and maybe even now, although I will say no two signatures. I mean, if you compare signatures, your face is your face. Obviously, there are changes over a long enough stretch of time, but the position, what your computer's doing is not looking at wrinkles and whether you have a beard or not. It's looking at the position of your ears relative to your eyes, relative to your nose. These are mathematical proportions that don't change. Signatures,
because if I use my phone, the AI in my phone, if I shaved my beard, it would still recognize me. If I wore glasses, it would still recognize me. And actually, Veg is getting clarifying here because maybe we didn't quite understand. I'm not suggesting people jump through hoops. I'm suggesting people are in no position to claim there was not fraud if they know not fraud if they know that for practical reasons. They aren't doing what is necessary to secure the integrity of the process. So she's asserting that we can't claim there is no fraud because there's a bunch of people that are verifying that those signatures are authentic, and they really can't. I think that's what she's saying.
I mean, the answer to Veg here. I mean, I say we don't have the evidence to secure the integrity of the process. I mean, listen, yes, Sean and I on this radio or podcast or what do you call this vodcast?
Call it a podcast. I don't even know what we're
calling. Right, but do we have what's in front of us? No, but don't think. I mean, we're around, right? President Trump, his legal team, people in various states have spent millions of dollars trying to find evidence, and they can't do it. Now, of course, this guy's point is, well, they're asking for the wrong thing. But again, his claim sounds plausible on its face, but the more you start to ask questions about what's that?
It's a her, I believe.
No, I'm talking about the.
I'm
talking about the guy with the video where his idea is that the lawyers are asking for the wrong evidence, and that sounds plausible on its face until you start to think about it with any kind of level of scrutiny, like we were starting to do. It makes a nice little pitch on a show that he's doing.
This is the final thing I wanted to mention.
That also benefits the sale of his product.
So he's got a product that he's pitching, and he's talking about data protection as well. So to me, it sounds like he's tried to pitch this product. There was a roadblock because of GDPR. I don't know if that's a term they use in America, but data protection. So there's protection to your vote and your privacy with that vote. He's probably gone in to pitch, let me scan all of these forms with all of this public form data on it. And he's not getting the point. Yes, it's public data, but to the individual, not to the guy who invented QCAT, who's created a scanning machine to check stuff that's irrelevant to what he wants to find out. The ballots are and for me, just where I keep getting unstuck, and this was shit that I got last week, and this video hasn't changed my mind, is I can't conceive of a single process that you can pull off to turn over in multiple states. Let's say 1 million, let's say 750,000 votes by changing ballots that already have the name and address of somebody on it who, you can't predict what people are going to vote at the polling station, and then quickly typing up the ballot to match it and then slipping it in. I can't comprehend that. It doesn't. I mean, Sean, it's not even
proof in the pudding here is, so Donald Trump lost this election. I mean, if you want to, on one level, he lost it by 7 million votes, but on a more accurate level, he lost it by, if you take the three closest states and flip them, Georgia, Arizona, and PA. I think that's enough to give him 269, which would throw the election to the House. And then it was 16, think Arizona is what, 11? Pennsylvania is 20 electoral votes. How many is Arizona? 11.
It was. We could. Hey Google, how many electoral votes is Arizona?
2020 U.S. presidential election results for Arizona. According to
the
Associated.
No. Hey Google, stop. Yeah, she doesn't know.
Hold on 1 second. I have my laptop right here. Arizona.
Actually, I'm going to put you on the screen because I need to have my pee. By the way, I've had a lot of water, so I'm going to make you the showcase headliner now.
Okay. Right. Well, have fun. So it's just me, but the Arizona has I'm doing this the stupid way. www.270 to win. A great reference map for all U.S. election related questions. That didn't work because I forgot the 2. Sorry for the dead air time, but Arizona has, I was right, 11 electoral votes, and that makes 47. And if you subtract 306, 47 from 306, you'll find that's 269. That would have sent the election to the House, and because of the way the rules were, Donald Trump probably would have been reelected president of the United States. So now if you look at the margins in those states and popular vote, I believe Pennsylvania was about 80,000, and Arizona and Georgia were in the neighborhood of 15. So for some quick math, basically 110,000 votes would have been enough. So let's call that the margin of victory in terms of popular vote. Having said that, in 2016, the margin was similar. In Pennsylvania, Michigan, it was like 10,000 votes. Wisconsin, it was 10,000 votes. And in Pennsylvania, it was like 40,000 votes. So what I was saying, Sean, is that here in 2020, the real margin for Donald Trump was negative. He needed another, in the correct states, he needed another 110,000 votes, to swing the election, 110,000 votes. 80 or so in Pennsylvania, he needed a swing of 80,000 votes. And in Michigan and Georgia, a swing of 15 each. Would have given him those 3 states, would have sent the election to the House, and under the current rules, Donald Trump would have probably been reelected because of the way the rules work without getting into the nitty-gritty. In 2016, Hillary Clinton needed 70,000 votes in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan to carry the election. You don't recall a month-long campaign of Hillary Clinton claiming electoral fraud in 2016 because she lost by 70,000 votes. In fact, she conceded the next day. She didn't come out that night, but she did come out after the early in the morning the next day. I remember driving back from a doctor's appointment, listening to her concession speech, which was beautiful. Donald Trump has proven who he is, both character-wise and it's ludicrous. The 2016 was closer, even though he lost again the popular vote that time by 3 million votes. This time he lost by 7 million votes, and by a wider margin in the 3 states that counted, quote unquote, than Hillary Clinton lost by in 2016. And yet he's just going on ceaselessly with this election fraud, which, as you point out, is completely, it's not plausible because of the diversity of the systems used, of the backflips that would be required. It says something about him that he won't let go of this claim when 4 years ago, Hillary Clinton, who so many people don't like and is supposedly a devil woman, conceded the following day.
I think too. I don't try to. I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I don't really go into those narratives for the audience because there's people that have commented that to them that's not important because he has every right to challenge it, and what is right is a subjective thing. And
sure.
I'm happy to I think when I started to look at this video,
he had a right to demand all legal recounts and everything, but he's done that. The Electoral College met and voted. It's over.
Which is why he's seeing backlash. I think the other thing that I want when I'm speaking to the people who are commenting about this, who are sending these videos across. And feel free to step out if you need to. You got a little bit of a tickle.
Yeah, I do. I might grab some water. I'll be right back.
Yep. So the thing, go right ahead. So the thing for me, and following up on what Andrew said, my when you look at Donald Trump, he was making issues of the election before it happened. He was claiming voter fraud before it happened. And you would think that he would have the wherewithal to maybe prepare for this and to plan ahead for this and to put things in place to stop it. And I think it's telling that after the fact, he's acting surprised that that he believes there was fraud that's overturned the election, and he knew it was coming, which if anything should be an indictment as to him as a leader in itself. But there's when we get evidence like this, when we take a look at these videos that are coming across, and just recapping, I was just saying that Donald Trump was quoting, and he was saying this last week. He was calling foul before the election happened. He had enough notice and time to do something about it if he knew there was going to be fraud. And this is the other obvious talk. It is just a talking point, but it is still something that weighs on me. Why is it that we're only checking in the key swing states that he's lost? So it's a strategical thing. It looks like, and fine, I don't care if you're going to take a legal charge, for 110,000 votes. I get that. That everything is on the line for them. Go nuts. But there is a time and a place where, in my view, it's dangerous now. It's dangerous to have, these supporters thinking like this could turn around. And I'm curious to see what happens over the coming months. We're running out of time. I want to jump on. What I'm going to do is jump on to one of the other pieces. I wanted to go into the affidavits because there were some comments that said, look at the 50,000 affidavits. Somebody said, look at the A1000 affidavits, capital A, and then 1000 affidavits. And there was only 234 affidavits, I think, that they presented to a Michigan court, they being the Trump legal team. And when I looked at those affidavits, just to quickly address that, I read through, I want to say 40 of them, which I know in my view, my initial assumption is it's going to be more than the people who commented on that video looked into it. So it took me a good 20 minutes to find the affidavits, download the PDF of them all. You can read them. A lot of them are handwritten, and they're all just speculative things and people just saying shit. And again, I just want to point out to anybody who's watching this, an affidavit, just because you've signed an affidavit doesn't mean that you are at risk of going to jail. I've spoken with a few people. I know one lawyer here, and I've read something elsewhere that says it's very rare that anybody gets arrested for lying or misleading on an affidavit because everybody has the chance to recant, or ignorance could be a reason as to why they've made a wrong statement. And a lot of those affidavits were, I was in the room and I said that, the signature looks funny and they didn't listen to me. Well, yeah, because they've already checked the signatures and you're not trained to do that, or they haven't even, that's not your job. So of course, and there's a lot of stuff on there that doesn't look compelling in any way. So I'm not going to go into any detail on the affidavits because the legal system has looked at those affidavits and said they're all bullshit anyway. There's really nothing we can do to look into it. And an affidavit at the end of the day is just a means to an end. It gives you some direction on where to go find that evidence. But there was one.
An affidavit is like a patent. Anyone can file it about anything they think.
And it is, and this is something anybody can look up. It is rare for someone to get prosecuted for filling in a false affidavit. It just doesn't happen.
Heard of it. You'd have to prove the affidavit itself was a lie. And what you're talking about, these affidavits are going to be subjective. I thought this looked funny. I witnessed this. They'd have to run it, like to make a prosecution, you'd have to run around, it's not happening.
I am going to. So there was one other article that came out, this was one that it took me a second. I thought, oh, this looks like it's somewhat interesting, not knowing a lot about how where the data or the setup here. Sorry, I'm not doing a good job of explaining things. Let me just share my screen. So the other thing that somebody provided me was a link to this article here saying that there was more votes than registered voters. And they used the Worldometer, which actually isn't a bad data source. It does cite its sources, and it lists all of these different states. And as of this date, here's how many registered voters there are. And the Worldometer isn't 100% up to date, but it was quite a big number. And in it says, using these numbers as of today, which are materially similar to Binney's. So Binney's was, I forget who it was, but they gave a 66.2% of all voters voted in the 2020 election. So right away, they're dealing with some fuzzy math. That equals 141.5 voters who voted in the 2020 election. If President Trump won 74 million votes, then that would leave 67.5 million votes remaining for Biden. This means 13 million duplicate or made-up ballots were created and counted for Biden. Now, I looked into this and I found articles that actually said, no, actually the data they have is wrong. And if you go to factcheck.org, which it took me about 10 minutes to find this, they actually go through each state. And just for, this isn't going to be it, is it? So this article goes through each state. Where is it? Balls. I thought I had it set up. This is me being prepared. So the article that it's referencing on factcheck.org, it's not this one. They actually went through each state here, and they found that a lot of the numbers on this article, this was quite a popular article, were incorrect as of the state's data. And I went into the state's data, and on multiple states that they referenced, I think there was a handful of states where the numbers weren't correct. Just the data was wrong. So this was another piece of evidence that we were sent. I was able to go within 10 or 15 minutes, go on the state
Sean,
website.
Yeah, I mean, this one shouldn't even pass the sniff test. Go down for a second. Yeah. If President Trump won 74 million votes, first of all, the assumption is that Trump's vote totals are absolutely correct, right? I mean, so we're beginning from the baseline that every vote he got was totally legitimate, right? Which means that therefore all illegitimately cast, every illegitimate vote cast must have been for Biden. That only leaves 67.5 million. So what this person is claiming then is that Biden somehow generated something on the order of
it's going to be something on the order of
14.5 million fake votes.
Yeah. So what they're saying, this is what people are believing. Let's put aside what your initial reaction is, because that was I think when I looked at it, it was about 2 a.m. when I read this. So I don't think I was as articulate as you were. But when I looked at this, I thought, okay, so let's say they have a point that the percentages are the percentages and the registered voters are less than the actual number of people who voted, just as a baseline. That to me is intriguing enough to investigate. Let's grant that.
Enough.
And I went to the state websites and I checked the numbers against the numbers on here, and they didn't match. I was checking the up-to-date as of the election, what the number of registered voters were. And I think in the 3 states that I looked at, I think right away I was able to make up 1.5 million votes from this article, just looking at 3 states. Veg has a comment on that. But you have to look at who sponsors, pays for, and runs Fact Check. Fine. If we were to say factcheck.org is sponsored by somebody who's supporting Biden, I still was able to go to the state website and check those numbers myself. So I didn't just go on, that was the point. I didn't just work off of factcheck.org as my source. I went to the state government websites to check what the registered voter numbers were, which didn't corroborate this data here. So I have to throw that out. I have to say that's not accurate, because I was able to make up in 3 states 1.5 million votes that weren't there. And the article cited multiple states. It cited what they found when they went on the state website, and they gave the number. So I'm not going to accept this as evidence that the outcome was fraudulent. Was there election fraud? In every election, there is election fraud. It's minute, but was there a wide scale? Plan to overturn the election? No, I don't think there was. Not at all. So I think for me, I appreciate that if you have more evidence, send it in. And there were some other points. There were some other links that we had. We don't have time to look at. If you want us to go over it, let us know. We can investigate it. It's not a problem. But just so you know, we're about to go into the sports section. You may want to stick around because we do have a new intro. You haven't seen this.
Oh boy,
this is going to be exciting. So that's. Andrew, do you have any final thoughts on the election?
Well, I didn't mean to. I mean, your methodology of like taking it seriously and checking it, like I just didn't have the time to do that, so I was giving you my first blush reaction.
No, and I think that's what most. And I think that's an appropriate reaction. I think I was doing this as an exercise to, people who give me these links. They're not giving them to me because you're an ass. I'm going to just send this to you. And they're trying to help me in a way. Let's look at it as almost like a Jehovah's Witness. They're knocking on my door with a genuine view of saving my soul. So I'm going to look at it. I'm going to explain why this data doesn't work.
I'm going to just sum up. I'm going to sum up by saying one last thing. There was my wife and child, but yes. Hi, everyone. I will sum up by saying it's not my intent, nor do I. I mean, there are a lot of folks out there who immediately take a sort of hostile position. There's my Philly accent coming out towards, Trump people. I can tell you, I knocked doors in 2016. It was the first time I ever knocked doors for a presidential candidate. It was 2016, believe it or not, for Hillary.
So you're biased. We can't trust anything you're saying.
I am biased. Of course, I'm totally biased. But it's traumatic. When you put that much of your heart and soul, you're knocking doors, pounding pavement, talking to voters, and in an election that was emotionally charged because of who Donald Trump is. That's what he's good at, right? Is getting people engaged and ginned up, for good or for ill. That was what made him a successful reality television star, was his ability to, his magnetic personality, right? He's strong personality. People are either drawn to or repulsed by him, but nobody feels lukewarmly about him, right? And so it hurts, and you look for, it's really like going through grieving. I actually ran for the Pennsylvania State House of Representatives here and lost. And I have to say, it's just like they give you those 5 stages of grieving, and the first one is denial, and the second one is this. I actually felt myself going through that after the loss, and denial that night when I realized that I had lost. I didn't deny that I'd lost. There was a question in my mind that the results were accurate. But I remember driving home thinking, well, all right, I'm just going to keep, I'm going to keep it rolling. Like, these elections happen every 2 years. So I'm going to keep it together. Making plans in my head for what I'm going to do next, to try to run again 2 years from now. This isn't over. And then, a few days later, I said, I don't know if I can really, it's people don't understand what is involved, even running a relatively small office like the State House of Representatives in Pennsylvania. It takes so much of your time, your effort, you demand so much on your family. But I realized looking backwards, I was just in denial, that first night that somehow I could somehow keep this going. So I understand people, who are emotionally invested, who are on the wrong side of the result, wanting to find a way that somehow things aren't what they appear. I, accept what happened in 2016, but I cried. I'm going to tell you, I literally shed tears driving back, listening to Hillary Clinton's concession speech the next morning on my way back from the doctor's office. It was like a death, but eventually you have to move on and just live to fight another day.
Well, Andrew, we're going to move on. Heads up, this is usually when you bow out. We're going to go to the sports section. And this is a particularly long show, Andrew. We don't normally go this long, but we covered a lot of ground today. So if you are back in the future,
I'm having a good time, and I hope I'm doing well.
I think you're killing it for your first time, and looking forward to hearing you on other topics. So before you pass away, we're going to go on to the next next one, and we have a new intro for that. Oh, these are so good, Veg. I can't tell you how impressed you're going to be. And then you're going to bugger off because it's about sports. And that's when Veg is going to go. I can't wait. They're so shit. We're going to keep doing more of them. They're going to be magical. Actually, I need to take. There we go. So this week we are going to be talking. I'm really excited about this part because it's one of the things that I've spoke. Like, I know this topic better than any other topic we've discussed. I haven't had to do much research for this, and I've been talking about it with some of my friends in my fantasy football league for quite some time. And to those of you that are still here, we're talking the Philadelphia Eagles. It's a bit of a guilty pleasure us bringing this up because recently, for those of you who don't watch sport, and actually that's probably Veg saying goodbye. Let me just double check. Sports. That's you. She's on her.
Oh, Veg, hang around. Like sports is a microcosm of society. You're going to see insights into all of the life's big questions being played out in the quarterback controversy in Philadelphia.
So this week, to those uninitiated, to those, let's say, overseas who do know football, I think most people in the UK, for example, football's quite big. So the Eagles have invested a lot of money and time into the quarterback. And in the NFL, the quarterback is the most important position, probably in any sport, most important position to any team, heavily invested in. The Eagles invested 5 years into a player named Carson Wentz from a small school, came in and really showed that he was, mentally quite switched on, was very good at understanding the game, and ended up getting injured after what was a world-beating year in 2017. The Eagles went on to win the Super Bowl with Nick Foles, which was very sad for Carson Wentz. I really felt for the guy, and he had to sit on the sidelines and watch Nick Foles win a Super Bowl. The Eagles made a decision that we were going to let go of Nick Foles, bring in Carson Wentz. Didn't want a quarterback controversy, and Carson Wentz went on to.
Nick Foles did stay here the following year.
No, didn't he go straight away? It was after the Super Bowl he left. Oh no, he stayed as a backup, didn't he? So he stayed.
And he won them up because Carson Wentz got injured again the next year. They were really headed out of the playoffs until Nick Foles showed up. So for 2 years running, Nick Foles ran the stretch run for the Eagles. Now in 2017, the thing was all but clinched when Wentz went down. They were playing the Rams when in like the third quarter, I think Wentz went down with the knee injury. Yeah. But the Eagles were ahead, and by winning that game, Foles didn't do well in that game. He was coming in cold, but he did well enough to maintain the lead. And by winning that game, as I recall, they were basically in a spot where they were all but certain to be the number one seed in the playoffs.
Yeah. And then the next year, so just to jump in, I just want to get through quick so we can jump into the nitty gritty. So the next year, Carson Wentz started. Had, I would say, a mediocre year. He finished strong against some terrible teams. Doug Peterson is one of the best coaches in the NFL in the last 2 months of the season. I think a lot of credit should go to Doug Peterson, in my view. And he ended up getting knocked out by what is largely a cheap shot. I think it was very unlucky. I think Carson Wentz has been one of the most unlucky players to a degree in his NFL career, more so than any other player. But he's come back as a player who is not himself, and he is now being benched. And this is problematic for the Eagles because they have a lot invested in Carson Wentz. And, from my perspective, I find it Jalen Hurts, as somebody who's come in to play quarterback, his story as far as how he's got there, his intangibles, his provenance, so to speak, is incredible. He's had to prove himself at some of the biggest universities in the country, if not the world, as far as a sporting perspective is concerned. And he's performed, and he has kept his shit together, and he has come in again as a rookie quarterback. And I don't remember even Donovan McNabb. I'm thinking back to the rookie quarterbacks that have come in and have looked as polished as Jalen Hurts has looked in his first 2 or 3 starts. Now that begs the question, who should be the starter?
You're killing me.
What is your view, I guess, right now? So we have Jalen Hurts is in, Carson Wentz is on the bench. Eagles have a lot of money invested in him. Jalen Hurts is probably going to start the remainder of the season. What's the deal?
The deal is it's a baked cake. It's going to be Jalen Hurts today. It'll be Jalen Hurts next week, and Carson Wentz is on his way out of town.
I would agree with that. I remember reading when the season happened, because there was a lot of debate on the draft pick for Jalen Hurts, and I remember reading how much the Eagles actually they were actively seeking him. They were interviewing him. They were really interested in him, and I think given his intangibles, understandably, I think fans are annoyed because they bring in a wide receiver in that position. But I think, in my view. Yeah, in my view, however, they don't now necessarily, but I'll come back to that. But in my view, I think this was a purposeful thing based on what they saw out of Carson Wentz the last 2 years, because he wasn't lighting it on fire like he was in 2017, and he has been degrading slowly. And my guess, and I said this, and my fantasy football league friends will back me up. I said I think when they drafted him, I think they have question marks about Carson Wentz. I think they're not sure about him and want an insurance policy that they could potentially trade away for a draft pick if Carson Wentz turns good. If he goes bad, then they have not a lot of money invested into a priority position.
Hey, I'm going to do you one better. I honestly, at the end of 2017, after the Eagles had won the Super Bowl with Nick Foles, I participated in a Philadelphia sports message board, and I knew it would, light the world on fire in 2017. But I floated the notion that they really should think about trading Carson Wentz at that moment. And I understood that, at that point, Carson Wentz looked like a world beater. He basically had an MVP season that was the only reason he didn't win the MVP that year is because he wound up missing the final 2 or 3 games, as a result of the knee injury, so he didn't lead them through the complete, but he had them it was 11 straight wins. And he was amazing. He was amazing. But already that was because his first year got cut short with an injury, as I recall. And now his second year got cut short with an injury. And so there was sort of an injury question about him as his third year. His fourth year, he did go through the whole season, got injured in the playoff game. And I agree the shot was cheap. And he was improving as that season went on.
Yeah, he was.
But now he comes back this year and, he seems to really be worse for wear in terms of the injury, and he seems less confident in all this. And I thought back in 2017, what's the most you can ask for a quarterback that they win the Super Bowl? Well, Nick Foles won the Super Bowl, and he's not. Carson Wentz is a little bit older than you realize, so that the age difference between Foles and Wentz wasn't as great as you might expect, considering that Foles had been in the league already, I think 5 years.
Only 4 years, isn't it? 3 years?
4 years. I guess it was 3 or 4 years by the time by the time Wentz was on the scene. And I thought, at that moment, Wentz was everybody thought that Wentz was a franchise quarterback, which is of course why I was getting tomatoes thrown at me for even floating it. But I thought, remember, of course, what made the 1990s, early 90s Dallas Cowboys was trading Herschel Walker. When he was at the height of his powers to the Minnesota Vikings, and they gave up more than they should have to get him. And I thought, what would the New York Jets, for example, a team that had been searching for a franchise quarterback since Joe Namath went down, or retired or was traded from the Jets at the end of his career, who plays in the largest media market in the world, who plays second fiddle to the Giants all the time, what wouldn't they give for a Carson Wentz at that moment? It would have been worth at least kicking the tires on, find out, because you had a quarterback who not just won the Super Bowl, but won it in a very particular way. He won it by beating the greatest of all time, the unquestionable greatest of all time, with all apologies to Peyton Manning. I mean, there's no question at this point that Tom Brady is it.
Yeah, no doubt.
And he didn't just beat it it's not the Eagles had a great defense and they were able to contain Tom Brady, or both teams had great defenses and it was a turnover. No, he outgunned him throughout that game. The next year he comes back as the backup, and on their way through the end of the season, when the Eagles entered December, they looked like a sure shot to miss the playoffs. They won, I think, 3 or 4 games in December, again with Nick Foles, because Carson Wentz goes down. And in one of those games, he tied the NFL record for consecutive pass completions against the Redskins, 26 consecutive completed passes. Nick Foles runs hot and cold, and he hasn't had a lot of success since he left here. But of course, he didn't have a lot of success after he left here the first time, and he had an historic season the first time he was here, 27 touchdowns against 2 interceptions.
Yeah.
There's something about the Andy Reid / Doug Peterson system, and Doug is an acolyte of Andy Reid, that really works for Nick Foles, clearly. Yeah. His great success was going to be here. So I thought, after that, why not give Nick Foles a shot, get the bevy of draft picks that you would get. You could build a team for years into the future, draft Foles' eventual replacement as part of that, obviously, and go on. They didn't do that. It was probably an impractical thought, but here we are,
was a lot of
years later.
You'd be looking at that point, years of something like 60 million pounds in lost cat. I forget what it was. It maybe not that much, but it was or something like
Well,
20
right, but
million a
they
year.
ended up paying Foles that backup year. I think they gave him 20 million that first year after the Super Bowl to be the backup because you know
They gave him a lot.
The guy who won.
Yeah.
Why not? My point here is just that they had an opportunity to really cash that Wentz chip in, and it would have taken a lot of guts to do it. I'm not because if Wentz went to New York and became Tom Brady too, you'd be a-holes forever.
It would be
But
the
Tom
dumbest
Brady's
move in NFL history.
Right. But on the other hand, Tom Brady is a singular event in the history of, and Peyton Manning too. The two of them are singular events, right? What are the chances that any given guy, no matter how good he looks on any given Sunday or for one season, winds up being either of them? Not going to happen probably.
I think I wouldn't have agreed with that myself. Only because you look at the physical capabilities and what Carson Wentz had done throughout his career. He is still a gifted player. And when we started to see the decline, and I don't know if you watch Brian Baldinger's Twitter at all.
Oh, I sure did. You're talking about that, like he just doesn't throw the ball.
But there's a lot of opportunities, and I thought when Jalen Hurts went in there and he was managing the game, it's not as if there was loads of receivers that were coming open, but he was hitting the open receivers in stride, and there was something in Carson.
And that's what Nick Foles did, by the way.
Yeah, but Nick Foles didn't have to. And Nick Foles, he throws a very easy ball to catch. He's not firing it in like Carson, but Carson, when you see him in the pocket, it is just like wild-eyed and scared shitless. And maybe that's part of the injury as well. But when you have a Jalen Hurts on the horizon, I think Carson Wentz, his fall has been absolutely historic. And with that historic fall, I don't think the Eagles are at a stage where they can be left accountable for, let's say, moving on. Take it out.
Say hi. Here, I'll put you on. Say hello.
What's up?
He wants one of my black hats, so yeah.
So I think we're at a stage though where we've had 3 years of Carson Wentz, and somebody compared him to Brett Favre in an article. I forget who it was, and how Brett Favre, they didn't have Atlanta lost belief in him, traded him, and he became one of the greatest Green Bay quarterbacks of all time. Carson Wentz has already proven he's a franchise
quarterback. Started for Brett Favre.
No, but that's my point. Carson Wentz was a starter and was proven. No quarterback statistically has dropped off as prolifically as he has in the 3 years. If he goes on and becomes an amazing player somewhere else, that's not going to happen in Philadelphia. And the Eagles, in that instance, wouldn't be, I guess, left accountable for trading him for a second-round pick in any way at this stage.
I think that there's a lot that the Eagles are accountable for. They've had terrible drafts the last several years. They haven't a lot of value.
I would argue this. I had a debate with somebody because a lot of people say Howie out. I'm not a Howie out guy. The only thing I would say Howie is really on the hook for are the free agent contracts. As far as the draft picks, you look at how many players were they able to bring up from the lower rounds because they mortgaged their future when they took on Carson Wentz. So his statistics and draft picks are going to be worse than every other GM because he traded years of first and second round picks. So he's been working the bottom of the barrel. So you look at Jordan Mailata, you look at Josh Sweat, you look at Corey Clement, you look at Miles Sanders, you look at Dallas Goedert. You have a lot of players that have come up out of nowhere. Greg Ward, and even you could see a return from John Hightower. Rager could be something, and I don't buy the argument that Jefferson would have been amazing in Philadelphia because he still had Carson Wentz throwing. So I don't know that Howie is as bad as people make him out to be.
I have some things to say about this. Can I pause myself for 1 second and get him his hat? I'll be right back. You keep it rolling. But I will say this: I'm not impressed by the receiver. I mean, now again, it is the difference between Carson Wentz throwing to them and Jordan Rager throwing, or not Jordan Rager, Jalen Hurts throwing to them.
Yeah.
I will continue to see whether that really was the issue.
We'll discuss it.
But I don't see receivers getting a lot of separation. But I'll be right back. Yeah. So,
and I think what Dixon's going to be talking about is, when we take a look at the the wide receivers, and this is sort of my point. I don't think necessarily that Jalen Reagor is the future or is the answer per se. I don't think he was a better pick than Jefferson. However, I think people are going nuts on Jefferson being the be all and end all. If he was in Philly, I don't think. No, sorry. Let me take a step back. He is an incredible receiver, but he would not look like an incredible receiver here in Philadelphia. And I could see a world where he's drafted by the Eagles. He doesn't get to show his potential, and we all think he's a bust. He's playing with Kirk Cousins, who, he throws a lot of interceptions, and he's stupid a lot of times with the ball, but he does throw for yards, and he gives his receivers opportunities to catch the ball. And Jefferson has shown up. It's no small feat in this COVID year to come out and to play the way he's played. However, that being said, the Eagles don't have him. They have Jalen Reagor, and that's going to be something that still remains to be seen. It is conceivable that Jalen Reagor could still come good. And interestingly, the second Jalen Hurts has come into the lineup, Jalen Reagor has looked a lot better. Oh, that's okay. So, and just to reiterate, I was just saying that Jefferson as the alternative to Reagor has looked incredible, but we would not be saying how amazing Jefferson was if he was in Philadelphia. And that's not to say he's not an incredible receiver. We wouldn't know it. Do I think Reagor is an incredible receiver? No, but he's catching everything that's being thrown to him. He's had a few little niggles, and it's a COVID year. So I'm not willing to say categorically that he's not going to be a good receiver long term.
I wouldn't say. I mean, he's only in his rookie season. I mean, what concerns me is, like, I remember watching, and it was only one play, and it was while Carson Wentz was still in, but I remember it was a target to him, and the play was clearly designed for Reagor, and there was just no separation there at all. And when you see I don't know if that's an issue with route running or speed, but that's what I mean, you look around and it just seems like these Eagles receivers are, they're missing that vertical threat. They have been for years. That's why they brought Deshaun Jackson, and of course, Deshaun back, but he's not able to stay on the field.
I think they've been missing opportunities, though, because if you look at Reagor in the last game, so again, I'm not claiming Reagor is the deep threat. However, he was beating, what's his name? The Cardinals star cornerback. He was giving, what's his name?
I'm sorry, I'm not going to remember.
But he was, did you watch the Eagles Cardinals game?
I watched, about probably a half of it all told.
There was a pass that was in the end zone.
Sorry, when you have
Reagor.
a 5-year-old, sometimes the ability to sit down and watch a 4-hour football game.
One-on-one had been beating, it's going to bother me, but was beating the Cardinals star cornerback. And he had a good 5-6 yard separation down the field. Hurts underthrew him, and he had to come back. And he was getting separation throughout that game. I think it's difficult with the inconsistency in quarterback play and his time on and off the field with injury to necessarily say he's a bust. He's not going to be probably the greatest wide receiver in NFL history or anything close to that. But I think Jefferson would have been
Peterson.
Yes. So he was beating Peterson. He was giving Peterson a hell of a time all game. And I think I saw a lot of potential in Reagor, and some people who watch him, I listen to some of the Eagles podcasts, say he looks slow, and he's either slow, but a lot of sprinters look slow when they're running because they're so efficient in how they run. And if he's getting separation looking slow, that's not a bad thing. But I also saw some potential in Kez Watkins. That's another draft pick of Howie. Hightower, he's been getting a lot of shit, but he's been playing with Carson Wentz, and I think he's shown potential at getting separation. So I think the next 2 to 3 weeks are really going to show what the Eagles wide receivers have in store, and they've looked 80% better since Jalen Hurts has been in the lineup.
Well, I mean, I honestly, Sean, I'm going to say something, and this is a completely, qualitative, subjective thing. It's nothing. It's not data-based. It's not the way you want to analyze anything. But just on the eyeball test, as they say, I like literally Jalen Hurts' face better than Carson Wentz's face. And what I mean by that is the look. The look is somebody who's engaged, aggressive, taking the initiative, who's who seems in control of things or trying to get control, I mean, in a good way. When you look at Carson Wentz, he always kind of has a little bit of a look of like deer in the headlights, like as you said earlier, frantic, like
It doesn't look like his world the NFL. He's so wholesome. Yeah. It looks like he's trying to act like the Tom Brady of the group. And I think when you look at Jalen Hurts, he has gone in there, and to get the praise he's gotten from vets who are on the team for his leadership skill, they don't have to say that, especially with Carson Wentz sitting.
I mean, if you look at the decisions, I mean, it really comes down to, I mean, Carson Wentz looks like games, instead of the game coming to him, he's trying to get on top of it somehow and never quite there. And that could be just frankly, I mean, what knocked him out at the playoff game last year? He was looking pretty good that last month. I thought the Eagles had a decent shot of, beating the Seahawks at home going into the game. But Wentz in that, he got concussed. And he looks like somebody who's not really over the effects of the concussion.
He doesn't look like a starting quarterback.
No.
He looks like
he's got a little star or fog in his mind.
It looks like,
the whole point of those Baldinger tweets, like the one he showed where, like, Carson Wentz is staring down a receiver who's completely open, right? And he just won't pull the trigger, and instead turns around, throws across his body a swing pass that has a much lower completion percentage just because of mechanically what he's trying to do.
Yeah.
For no good reason. And the guy has less space in front of him than the guy he's looking at.
Well, Hurts is throwing what Hurts has done, and I did some reading on him over his career. He's an aggressive quarterback. He's not stupid with the ball. He's apparently a pretty switched on guy. And there was an interesting interview. There was an interesting last week. Apparently, that one of the Cardinals coaches worked with Jalen Hurts at Oklahoma, and it was a mic'd up thing where they caught Doug Peterson talking to this quarterback about Jalen Hurts, and the guy who worked with Jalen Hurts said, "You got somebody who is completely and totally unflappable." And Doug said, "Yeah, I can't." And Doug made the comment, "Sometimes I wish he would get more excited or seem like he's more excited." And the guy said something to the effect that, "Yeah, he's fine. He's ready to go. He's just completely unflappable. There's nothing that is going to scare him off. No situation."
I would tend to be. I'm a little surprised that Doug Peterson said that, because to me,
I don't think he said that as a negative.
Exactly.
No, I think
exactly what that means. Point. You know what I mean? Like it's somebody who doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low. That's what you want, right? You want. I think that's
the comment of a coach that's still learning his player and doesn't, wants to make sure he's engaged. Because Carson Wentz, I think he spent years working with Carson Wentz. I think he feels invested in Carson Wentz. And I think Carson Wentz, he's used to Carson trying to manufacture that. I think Carson his passions are his business, his family, his hunting. And I think the NFL is something I bet he's going to be quite happy when he retires from the NFL, and that's behind him. And he can take all the millions he earned from the Eagles and go work as a Mormon somewhere. Or, I love Carson Wentz and the person he is, and the fact that he is the person he is. But in the NFL, I question as to whether he can rock up. Like Peyton Manning, he's a good guy, but Peyton Manning has that little bit of edge to him. Whereas I don't see Carson Wentz being particularly good at trash talking. And I think that you need that sort of edge mentality in the NFL.
Interesting. I hadn't thought about it from that perspective. I will say that I read something, or I heard something, and again, the provenance of this, and I hate to go into qualitative arguments because I think that the data on the field, is more than enough. Just the poor decisions, the bad throws, way over targeting, way passes that are too high, too short, too wide.
In front.
Yeah.
Misread.
And never had touch. I mean, always that was the thing about when you compared Foles to Wentz, both of them at the height of their powers. I mean, Wentz certainly had better arm strength. He had more confidence that if you needed to zip a ball into a tight space,
he was awesome at
Wentz
that
on the field, right? Yeah. And he had more maneuverability, more ability to extend the play, make things happen. Exactly. I mean, you could see why Wentz was the future and Foles wasn't. But what Foles always had over Wentz was the touch on passes. Like the passes always just seemed to float into exactly, those, especially on the longer balls. he had this ability, it seemed like, to just hit people in stride. I mean, Nick Foles, when you look back on it, to his first stint here, Nick Foles for a certain number of weeks made Riley Cooper look like a good wide receiver. Think
it's
about
true.
that. You know, when Nick Foles is on, he is on. But anyway, not enough with Nick Foles. I mean, his career is almost over.
There was one piece, and this will be my last point on this. There's one real innocuous characteristic that has always bothered me about Carson Wentz, and it makes me think that he can never be a winning quarterback in the NFL. And it's such a stupid thing, but it bothers me, is his inability to slide correctly. He's been in the NFL for 5 years, and if you ever watch him, he always gets to a point where if you watch Jalen Hurts, he will just slide about 2 yards before someone hits him, rather athletically, rather comfortably. Carson Wentz is an athletic person, but when he gets to the point where somebody's coming, he just sort of flops on the ground, or when he tries to slide, it looks like I don't know, like a flamingo trying to slide into second base. It's just, and to me, it's not like it's a hard thing to learn how to slide, because Tom Brady knows how to slide. He's one of the less athletic quarterbacks in the NFL. But the fact that Carson Wentz can't soldier up the wherewithal to slide properly, to me, is a key indicator that he can't physically make himself do certain things. He's so in the moment and so fog of war that I think he is not recoverable as a future Hall of Famer.
Well, I mean, he reminds me, to bring that up, of Michael Vick, actually. If you recall, Michael Vick, for all of his world-beating athleticism, that was the one thing he couldn't do it either.
But it wasn't like he tried to do it poorly. He just didn't do it.
No, by the end here, they told him, Mike, you got to slide, because we're putting everything on you, and you're going to get killed out there. Because Mike Vick was obviously quite a bit smaller than Carson, and he committed to it. He said he would do it, but when one of the reasons I think he gave up on it wasn't so much that he didn't mentally understand that this was something he needed to do, or that he was just going to go out there and screw it. I'm the tough guy. I'm going to prove everything by putting my head down. I think it was because when he did make attempts, they were so ugly, so bad, that he had as much of a chance of injuring himself attempting one of his terrible, ugly, unable to do slides as he did just by putting his head down and going for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He could blow out one of his knees. So yeah, I hear what you're saying on that. I was going to go back for a second because I got lost on the Nick Foles thing again, but with Wentz, and you were saying about his, his lack of decision making and some of the things that bother you. Wentz, his issue to me, and it is qualitative again, it's not, but I just see somebody who seems uncomfortable on a football field, in certain ways.
Yeah. That
you would expect a 5-year veteran would just have the rhythm of how to do things now. And
Spot on.
Doesn't. He for a guy with all of his athleticism, bodily, he looks like mechanically, he looks like he just learned to play quarterback last year. You know what I mean? There's still
injuries may have something to do with that. Yeah,
and that could be.
When you look at his run last year, going at when he had his quote good run against the worst teams in the NFC,
true,
which were the NFC East, he was losing all of those games after the first half, and he was playing terrible in the first half. And his stats came at a point against bad teams where every down was a throwing down. So even statistically, he had more opportunities to make good. So even last year, when people were saying, "Yep, that's the franchise quarterback," yeah, fair play. He showed up when things were at their worst, and he was able to, which was always a thing about Carson Wentz. He could never win in the spot, and he was able to win in the spot. And I think he's got a very strong will to succeed. He has to go from where he was in university or college to where he is in the professional game. And to get where he is, he's got to be a smart, switched on guy. But I think you're right. I think there's a compatibility with Carson Wentz in the NFL. And there's just a lack of, it's almost like he's not in his own skin. When you see, I follow him on Instagram, and when you see every picture is not about football. It's not about the game. It's always about him in hunting gear and him with his dogs. He's got 3 golden retrievers, and his wife and his kid, which is great. I have no problem with that, and I'm not knocking him for it.
Sure.
But I don't think the NFL or football is his number one passion.
Well, I heard something, and this was the other point I was going to make, and I nearly forgot. And I'm glad you came back around to his personal life, his faith. Again, all wonderful human qualities, no doubt. But I heard, and again, the provenance of this, whatever, but that he's felt sort of off or betrayed by the organization, and the only person he trusts in the NFL is Frank Reich, who was the offensive coordinator here in 2017, and obviously moved on to be head coach of the Colts. And that part of the reason for that is that they share the same religion. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, listen, if you're emotionally the kind of person who gets so attached to one offensive coordinator, well, if you're successful at what you're doing with that offensive coordinator, this is the NFL. Offensive coordinators get offered head coach jobs, good ones, successful ones, especially ones that win Super Bowls. They're going to be head coaches somewhere else.
They should be able to hit open receivers on their first read.
And you can't demand that his fairly niche Christian, version of Christian faith. I mean, I'm not knocking it, but it's not it's not like Frank Reich was Roman Catholic or Lutheran, and so is Carson Wentz. It's some fairly smallish denomination. It's not even Mormon. I forget what it is, of Christianity, that you need that person who shares your exact faith pattern in order to be successful in the NFL.
It's an excuse.
Yeah.
It's at the end of the day, Aaron Rodgers didn't go apeshit when they drafted what is in the draft a higher up pick, a better quarterback in college. He's gotten better. And if you are that worried that they've brought in a quarterback who's unproven in the NFL, like he should have been. Nobody would have said this had they brought in Cam Newton to the Philadelphia Eagles. Nobody would have said that. I don't think anybody would have said, "Oh, they're going to." There's no way Cam Newton's replacing Carson Wentz. No way at the time. But they've drafted a young quarterback who people perceive as good. All of a sudden, Carson Wentz is now, cracking at the seams, and that's more of a question of Carson Wentz and his self-confidence as an NFL quarterback than it is, the Eagles organization for drafting him. So, anyway, I think we have been going, and this has been good rehearsal for future reference. But I hope you've enjoyed it today, Andrew.
I did. I hope I was reasonably okay for a first time.
I think you did better than I did on my first go. So we just need to remember when you're on with you, we need to, between you and I being chatterboxes, we need to make sure we're giving him a chance to speak.
Oh, right. Hugh,
turn to talk.
I'm sure his opinions are important.
More important than ours, I would say. Probably.
It was nice to speak with you, and I hope I do get a chance to return. This was a lot of fun.
I think we will be seeing you again. So for those of you, and Andrew, just stick for a second when I end the broadcast. You'll still be on with me, so people can see behind the curtain a little bit. So thank you to everybody who stuck around this far. We haven't picked our subject for next week, but if you do think of anything you'd like us to talk about, or you want us to rehash some of the things that we did talk about that maybe you don't agree with, like we did last week, let us know. Please like and subscribe to the videos. We want to see more people joining the conversation, as you saw from Veg. We are inviting comments in, and if you look at the videos, we are replying to every comment. So we just want more people entering the conversation, directing where it goes. And if you want to get on and just tell us we're full of shit, do that. We're more than happy with that. So anyway, until next week, thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you soon.